The notification sound was what woke me at 2:47 a.m. Not my phone, his. The screen lit up our dark bedroom with another message from Weekend Warriors, a group chat I'd never heard of despite being married to David for 12 years. What I discovered when I opened that phone wasn't just evidence of my husband's secret life. It was documentation of a conspiracy so elaborate that everything I'd believed about my marriage, my friends, and my own reality had been carefully orchestrated lies. My name is Dr. Catherine Reed, and for 8 years, I'd been building a successful forensic psychology practice while believing I was married to a loving husband who supported my career and shared my values about honesty and partnership. What I didn't know was that the man sleeping beside me had been documenting our entire marriage in a group chat with my closest friends, systematically destroying my reputation while positioning himself as the long-suffering victim of a controlling, ambitious wife. David thought he'd created the perfect exit strategy. Years of documented evidence showing him as the patient, supportive husband of an increasingly unreasonable woman who prioritized career over family. His group chat conspirators, including my best friend Sarah, my sister-in-law Monica, and 3 other couples we'd socialized with for years, had been helping him build a narrative that would justify whatever he planned to do next. What David had failed to consider was that his wife wasn't just someone with trust issues who'd discovered his betrayal. I was a forensic psychologist who specialized in analyzing deception patterns, documented evidence of psychological manipulation, and the kind of systematic behavior modification that could destroy someone's sense of reality while making them look like the problem. His group chat wasn't just casual conversation about marriage frustrations. It was a masterclass in gaslighting, reputation destruction, and collaborative psychological abuse that had been running for 3 years. But now, the woman who'd spent her career exposing lies and building airtight cases against manipulative people had access to every message, every strategy session, and every laugh they'd shared at my expense. Picture this. Our kitchen on a Tuesday morning that would have seemed perfectly normal if you didn't know that the man making coffee while asking about my day had spent the previous evening texting a group of 6 people about how my obsession with work was destroying our marriage and making family gatherings uncomfortable for everyone. David and I had developed what I thought was a comfortable morning routine over our 12 years together. He'd make coffee while I reviewed case files. We'd discuss our schedules, and he'd send me off to work with the kind of supportive husband energy that made our friends jealous of our partnership. "You've been working late again, Kath. I worry about you burning out with all these high-profile cases. Maybe we should plan a vacation? You know, reconnect as a couple?" What I'd interpreted as caring concern was actually David building documentation for the group chat about my workaholic tendencies, an inability to prioritize our relationship. Every conversation about my career success was being reframed as evidence of my selfishness and emotional unavailability. That particular morning, his phone had been unusually active. Constant buzzing that he'd attributed to work group chat drama that I shouldn't worry about. I'd been too focused on preparing for a major court testimony to pay attention to the specific pattern of notifications that would have revealed the group's morning strategy session about my latest unreasonable behavior. The night before, I'd declined to attend Monica's birthday party because I had case preparation that couldn't be delayed. A perfectly reasonable professional decision that had apparently triggered hours of group chat analysis about my antisocial tendencies and pattern of putting career before family obligations. "Honey, I understand that your work is important," David had said after I'd explained about missing the party. "But Monica was really hurt. She's been planning this for months, and family should come first sometimes." What I'd heard as gentle guidance was actually David establishing the foundation for that evening's group chat session, where he'd described my selfishness and inability to understand how my choices affect other people. My professional commitment was being systematically rebranded as personality dysfunction. The conversation had concluded with David suggesting we might benefit from couples counseling to work on communication and help me find better work-life balance. I'd agreed, thinking we were strengthening our relationship. He'd been documenting my agreement to therapy as evidence that even I recognized my behavioral problems. For 3 years, every conversation about my career, every professional success, every time I'd prioritized work responsibilities over social obligations, had been carefully documented and analyzed by a group of people I'd trusted, systematically building a case that I was the problem in our marriage. But David's perfect documentation system was about to become evidence in a very different kind of case than the one he'd been building. The 2:47 a.m. notification that changed everything came from a message that revealed the true scope of David's documentation project. Guys, she's getting suspicious about the phone buzzing. Need to switch to email for coordination until after the therapy appointment Thursday. As a forensic psychologist, I understood exactly how to analyze digital evidence without contaminating the source. David's phone contained 3 years of systematic documentation that went far beyond casual marriage complaints. This was organized psychological warfare designed to destroy my credibility while positioning him as the reasonable party. Phone examination sounds methodical. The Weekend Warriors group chat contained David, my best friend Sarah, my sister-in-law Monica, David's college friend Marcus, Marcus's wife Jennifer, and another couple from our social circle, Tom and Lisa. 7 people who'd been systematically documenting and analyzing my behavior with the thoroughness of a research project. What I discovered wasn't just casual gossip about marriage problems. These people had been conducting regular strategy sessions about how to respond to my behavior, what kind of social pressure to apply, and how to document incidents that could be used to support David's narrative about my character flaws. Sarah, 2 months ago. Kat's being weird about the dinner party again. David, you should document this pattern of social avoidance. Show she's becoming antisocial. Monica, 6 weeks ago. David's right about her work obsession. Last night, she spent the whole family dinner talking about her cases instead of asking about Mom's surgery recovery. Marcus, 3 weeks ago. Bro, you're a saint for putting up with this. Most guys would have left by now. Make sure the therapist understands how hard you've tried. Every social gathering I'd missed for work. Every time I'd been tired after long days. Every professional achievement that required travel or evening commitments had been carefully cataloged as evidence of my selfishness, antisocial behavior, and inability to maintain appropriate relationships. But what made the group chat particularly damaging was how they'd coordinated responses to manipulate my behavior and emotional state. When I'd expressed frustration about feeling isolated from friends, they'd been deliberately creating that isolation while documenting my complaints as evidence of paranoia and social dysfunction. Jennifer, 1 month ago. David, when Kat asks why we've been distant lately, tell her we're concerned about her work stress. Makes it look like caring instead of judgment. Tom, 3 weeks ago. Lisa and I will skip the next dinner invitation. If enough people decline, she'll think it's about her personality instead of us following the plan. Monica, 2 weeks ago. Perfect setup for the therapy suggestion. When she realizes people are avoiding her, David can position counseling as helping her understand how her behavior affects others. The group had been systematically gaslighting me for 3 years, creating social isolation while documenting my responses as proof of my problematic personality. They'd been manufacturing the evidence that would justify whatever David planned to do next. But what David and his conspirators had failed to consider was that they'd just provided a forensic psychologist with perfect documentation of coordinated psychological manipulation, reputation destruction, and the kind of systematic emotional abuse that I'd spent my career identifying and exposing in court cases. Professional training in forensic psychology provides specific expertise in analyzing patterns of deception, manipulation, and coordinated behavior that most people would miss. David's group chat wasn't just casual conversation. It was textbook evidence of systematic psychological abuse designed to modify my behavior and destroy my confidence. I approached the analysis with the same methodology I used for court cases involving psychological manipulation and emotional abuse. The group chat contained over 3,000 messages spanning 3 years, revealing coordination that went far beyond casual marriage complaints into organized reputation destruction. The pattern analysis revealed 3 distinct phases of their operation. Phase 1 had been observation and documentation, where they'd simply recorded my behavior and framed normal professional commitments as evidence of character flaws. Phase 2 involved active manipulation, where they'd coordinated social responses designed to modify my behavior and emotional state. Phase 3, which had begun 6 months ago, was preparation for what appeared to be divorce proceedings. The group had been documenting everything that could be used to support claims about my unfitness as a wife, my antisocial tendencies, and my inability to maintain healthy relationships. David, 4 months ago. Lawyer says we need more documentation of her refusing family obligations. Monica, can you plan something she'll definitely decline for work? Sarah, 3 months ago. I've been keeping notes about her social interactions like you asked. The patterns show someone who's becoming increasingly isolated and work-obsessed. Marcus, 2 months ago. Jennifer's therapist friend says this kind of documentation could be really useful in custody discussions if you guys had kids. The group had been building a legal case against me while I'd been completely unaware that my marriage was ending. Every conversation about couples therapy, every suggestion about work-life balance, every expression of concern about my stress levels had been strategic moves in a divorce preparation that I didn't know was happening. But the most damaging discovery was how they'd been manipulating my professional reputation. Sarah had been sharing details about my cases with the group, who then used that information to create social situations designed to make me look unethical or unprofessional. Monica, 5 months ago. If Sarah tells us about Kat's cases, we can ask questions at parties that make her look like she violates client confidentiality. Lisa, 4 months ago. Perfect. When she explains her work to be helpful, we can act uncomfortable and change the subject. Makes her look socially inappropriate. David, 3 months ago. Keep pushing the therapist's suggestion. When she agrees, it supports the narrative that even she knows her behavior is problematic. The group had been systematically destroying my social relationships, manipulating my professional interactions, and coordinating a divorce strategy while positioning themselves as concerned friends and family members trying to help our marriage. But what David and his conspirators had failed to understand was that they'd just provided a forensic psychologist with perfect documentation of coordinated psychological abuse, reputation destruction, and the kind of systematic manipulation that could result in serious legal consequences for everyone involved. The 4th phase of David's plan, which I discovered buried in the most recent messages, revealed a conspiracy so elaborate that it transformed my understanding of not just my marriage, but my entire social reality for the past 3 years. David wasn't just planning to divorce me. He'd been conducting a 3-year operation to systematically destroy my professional reputation, social relationships, and psychological stability in preparation for a custody battle over children we didn't even have yet, but that he'd been secretly trying to have with my best friend Sarah. Sarah, 1 week ago. Pregnancy test was negative again. Maybe we should wait until after the divorce is final before trying seriously. David, 1 week ago. Dr. Martinez says the timing doesn't matter legally, but it would be cleaner. Once we have documentation of Kat's mental instability, custody won't be an issue. Monica, 5 days ago. Mom's been asking about grandchildren. Should we tell her about the plan or wait until Sarah's actually pregnant? My husband of 12 years had been having an affair with my best friend while building a legal case to prove I was mentally unstable, all in preparation for a future custody battle over children they planned to have together. The group chat had been documenting evidence for divorce proceedings that would paint me as an unfit mother before I'd even become pregnant. But the conspiracy went deeper than infidelity and divorce planning. They'd been systematically sabotaging my professional relationships by sharing confidential information about my cases, creating situations designed to make me appear unethical, and building a network of concerned friends who could testify about my declining mental health and social dysfunction. Marcus, 2 weeks ago. Jennifer's sister works at the courthouse. She says Kat's been getting a reputation for being difficult with opposing counsel. Our documentation about her personality problems supports that narrative. Tom, 10 days ago. Lisa heard from her friend at the medical board that someone filed a complaint about Kat discussing cases inappropriately at social gatherings. Probably nothing, but it adds to the pattern. Sarah, 1 week ago. I've been sharing just enough case details to make it look like she violates confidentiality. When people ask questions based on what I've told them, she looks unprofessional for answering. The group had been orchestrating professional sabotage, reputation destruction, and psychological manipulation while documenting my responses as evidence of mental instability. They'd created a 3-year gaslighting operation designed to make me question my own reality while building legal ammunition for future custody battles. But David's perfect conspiracy had one fatal flaw. He'd documented everything in writing, providing a forensic psychologist with complete evidence of coordinated psychological abuse, professional sabotage, and legal conspiracy that violated multiple state and federal laws. The group chat that was supposed to destroy my credibility was about to become the foundation for criminal charges against 7 people who'd underestimated exactly how dangerous it was to systematically attack someone who understood both psychological manipulation and legal evidence standards. The beauty of David's documentation obsession was that he'd created perfect evidence for charges that would destroy not just his divorce strategy, but the lives of everyone who'd participated in 3 years of coordinated psychological abuse and professional sabotage. As a forensic psychologist with extensive court experience, I understood exactly how to build cases that would result in serious consequences for systematic manipulation and reputation destruction. The group chat contained evidence of conspiracy, defamation, professional sabotage, and psychological abuse that violated both civil and criminal statutes. Dr. Reed, this is the most comprehensive documentation of coordinated psychological abuse I've seen in 20 years of practice, explained my attorney after reviewing the complete group chat archive. We're looking at civil cases for defamation, conspiracy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, plus potential criminal charges for stalking, harassment, and professional sabotage. The first phase of justice involved exposing the conspiracy to the institutions they'd been manipulating. The medical board complaint against me had been filed by Tom's wife Lisa, using information Sarah had shared about my cases. The courthouse reputation damage had been orchestrated by Marcus through his wife Jennifer's sister. Letter to State Medical Board. I am providing documentation that the complaint filed against Dr. Catherine Reed was based on information illegally obtained and strategically shared by Sarah Williams as part of a coordinated campaign to damage Dr. Reed's professional reputation in preparation for divorce proceedings. The medical board's investigation revealed that every concern about my professional conduct had been manufactured by the group chat conspiracy. Rather than facing disciplinary action, I became the subject of a medical board inquiry into professional sabotage that would require testimony from all 7 conspirators. The second phase involved criminal charges for stalking and harassment based on their systematic documentation and manipulation of my behavior. 3 years of coordinated psychological abuse designed to modify my emotional state and social relationships met the legal definition of criminal stalking in our state. Detective Martinez. Dr. Reed, coordinated psychological manipulation involving multiple people falls under our stalking and harassment statutes. The systematic nature of their documentation shows premeditation that elevates this to felony-level charges. But the most devastating element was the civil case for conspiracy and defamation. The group chat provided perfect documentation that 7 people had systematically coordinated to destroy my reputation, manipulate my professional relationships, and damage my psychological well-being while positioning themselves as concerned friends. The financial consequences alone would be life-changing. 7 defendants facing joint and several liability for 3 years of systematic reputation destruction, professional sabotage, and psychological abuse. My attorney projected settlements that would exceed $2 million before considering punitive damages. David's perfect divorce strategy was becoming the evidence for criminal charges that would result in felony convictions, professional licensing board investigations, and civil judgments that would destroy the financial security of everyone involved in his conspiracy. The man who'd spent 3 years documenting evidence of my unfitness as a wife had provided perfect documentation of his fitness for prison, bankruptcy, and permanent destruction of his professional and social reputation. 2 years after discovering David's group chat conspiracy, I was sitting in my expanded practice office, reviewing consultation requests from attorneys handling similar cases of coordinated psychological abuse and reputation destruction. My expertise in analyzing systematic manipulation had made me a nationally recognized expert in digital evidence of psychological warfare. The criminal cases had resulted in felony convictions for all 7 conspirators. David received 18 months in federal prison for conspiracy and stalking. Sarah lost her teaching license and faced additional civil penalties for violating my privacy. Monica, Marcus, Jennifer, Tom, and Lisa all received probation and substantial financial judgments. Dr. Reed, your case has become a landmark precedent for prosecuting coordinated psychological abuse, explained the prosecutor during the sentencing hearing. The documentation these defendants provided has established new legal standards for protecting victims of systematic reputation destruction and digital stalking. The civil settlements had exceeded $3.2 million, with David and Sarah bearing primary liability for the conspiracy, while the other participants faced proportional responsibility for their roles in the systematic psychological abuse. None of them would recover financially from the consequences of their 3-year documentation project. My professional reputation had been completely restored with additional recognition for my expertise in identifying and exposing systematic manipulation. The medical board had not only dismissed all complaints against me, but had asked me to consult on developing protocols for protecting healthcare professionals from coordinated reputation attacks. I'd also begun dating again, this time with complete confidence in my ability to identify deception and manipulation before it could damage my emotional well-being. Men who were intimidated by my professional expertise in exposing lies were exactly the kind of people I no longer had time to consider. David had occasionally attempted to contact me from prison, apparently believing that his psychological manipulation skills would work even after being convicted of using them against me. I documented each attempt as evidence for his parole hearings, ensuring that his demonstrated inability to accept responsibility would extend his supervision period. The group chat that was supposed to destroy my marriage and professional reputation had become the foundation for criminal convictions, civil judgments, and legal precedents that would protect other victims of coordinated psychological abuse for years to come. David had thought he'd created the perfect documentation of my unfitness as a wife while building a relationship with my best friend. Instead, he'd provided perfect documentation of his fitness for prison, bankruptcy, and permanent status as a cautionary tale about underestimating forensic psychologists. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just exposing your husband's lies, it's using his obsessive documentation against him while building legal precedents that protect other women from the same kind of systematic psychological warfare. They'd called me controlling and antisocial. I'd used those false accusations to demonstrate what real control looked like when applied by someone who understood both psychology and law. And sometimes the greatest gift a manipulative husband can give you is complete written documentation of his conspiracy, delivered directly to someone whose career involves building airtight cases against people who think they're smarter than the evidence they leave behind. The champagne cork was still bouncing off the hotel room ceiling when I received the text message that would transform my cousin's dream vacation into a masterclass in consequences. "Thanks again for the amazing trip, cuz. Living my best life while you're stuck at work." The photo she'd attached showed her lounging by the infinity pool of the 5-star resort I'd booked and paid for, completely unaware that her best life was about to become a very expensive lesson in gratitude. My name is Sophia Lancaster, and for 15 years, I'd been building a boutique travel consulting business that specialized in creating unforgettable experiences for clients who understood the value of expertise and attention to detail. What my spoiled cousin Emma had never bothered to learn was that the woman she'd spent years treating like a personal ATM with a college degree wasn't just someone who worked in travel. I was someone who controlled every aspect of the luxury vacation she was currently enjoying at my expense. Emma thought she'd manipulated me into funding another one of her entitled adventures by guilting me about family obligations and playing on my parents' expectations about successful family members helping those less fortunate. What she'd actually done was provide a hospitality expert with perfect motivation to demonstrate exactly what happened when you confused generosity with stupidity and kindness with weakness. My family had spent years enabling Emma's pattern of using emotional manipulation and family guilt to extract money, favors, and support from relatives who'd achieved the success she felt entitled to without the effort she refused to invest. Her Bali vacation was about to become the final chapter in that particular family dynamic. Picture this: Thanksgiving dinner at my Aunt Patricia's house, where Emma had perfected the art of turning family gatherings into fundraising opportunities for her latest financial crisis or lifestyle aspiration. This particular dinner would be remembered as the moment Emma's manipulation tactics encountered someone who understood exactly how to use professional expertise as a weapon. Emma had arrived with her usual dramatic flair, regaling the family with stories about her influencer career that consisted mainly of posting vacation photos from trips other people funded while complaining about how hard it was to build a brand in today's competitive market. "The problem is that I need content that shows lifestyle elevation, you know? My followers expect aspirational travel experiences, but authentic luxury travel is so expensive. I'm basically stuck in this catch-22 where I need amazing trips to grow my platform, but I can't afford amazing trips without a bigger platform." What followed was Emma's carefully orchestrated presentation about a business opportunity that required her to travel to Bali to research luxury resort experiences for her social media brand. The trip would be an investment in her future that she couldn't afford on her current income from part-time retail work and occasional sponsored posts. "Sophia, you understand the travel industry better than anyone," Emma had said, turning to me with the calculating smile she'd perfected during 2 decades of family manipulation. This Bali trip could really launch my travel influencer career, but the research requires staying at high-end resorts to create authentic luxury content. I was hoping you might help me plan something amazing. The suggestion had been delicately presented, but the family pressure was unmistakable. My parents, aunt and uncle had all begun discussing how successful family members have obligations to help those who are still building their careers, and how Sophia's travel expertise could really make a difference in Emma's future. Sophia, you've been so blessed with your business success. Emma just needs someone to believe in her potential and give her the opportunity to prove herself. A trip like this could change her whole trajectory. I listened to my family transform Emma's desire for a luxury vacation into a noble family investment opportunity, while she sat there with the satisfied expression of someone who'd successfully weaponized family guilt against a relative with both the resources and expertise to provide exactly what she wanted. Let me think about what kind of trip would give you the best content opportunities, I'd finally said, watching Emma's face light up with premature victory. Bali has some incredible luxury resorts that would definitely provide the kind of aspirational content your followers would love. That evening, driving home from my aunt's house, I understood something profound about family dynamics and emotional manipulation. Emma's pattern of using guilt and family pressure to extract resources from successful relatives wasn't just annoying. It was a systematic exploitation of people who'd worked hard to build something meaningful. But what Emma had failed to consider was that she'd just asked a professional travel consultant to plan a luxury vacation that she expected someone else to fund, while treating that person like a personal travel agent rather than a successful business owner who understood exactly how to use hospitality industry expertise as an instrument of perfect justice. Monday morning found me in my office, designing what would appear to be the luxury Bali vacation of Emma's dreams, while carefully constructing what would actually become a masterclass in consequences for someone who'd spent years confusing family generosity with personal entitlement. I'd spent the weekend researching Emma's social media presence with the thoroughness I applied to high-end client travel planning. Her Instagram revealed exactly the kind of vapid lifestyle content that my industry colleagues love to mock. Poorly composed photos, #spam, and captions that demonstrated she understood neither travel nor luxury hospitality. Emma had 3,200 followers, mostly family members and high school acquaintances. Her influencer career consisted of posting photos from budget trips funded by relatives, accompanied by captions about living authentically and following your passion. She'd never disclosed that her travel experiences were funded by family guilt rather than brand partnerships. But what made Emma's request particularly insulting was her assumption that I'd provide expensive travel consulting services for free, while she treated my expertise like a family favor, rather than professional skill that commanded premium rates from actual clients. I began designing her Bali vacation with the same attention to detail I provided for clients who paid $50,000 for custom luxury travel experiences. 5-star resort accommodations, premium dining reservations, private transportation, cultural experiences, and spa treatments. Everything Emma had requested for her lifestyle content creation. Ms. Lancaster, the Amankila Resort would be perfect for your client's requirements, explained my contact at the luxury property booking agency. The Clifftop Suites provide exactly the kind of aspirational content opportunities that travel influencers seek, and our photography concierge service can ensure professional quality social media content. I crafted an itinerary that would provide Emma with 12 days of absolute luxury: ocean view suites, private beach access, personal butler service, helicopter tours, private yacht charters, and exclusive cultural experiences that most travelers could never access without expert industry connections. Every reservation was made in my name with my credit card information, using the industry relationships I'd built over 15 years of creating exceptional experiences for discerning clients. Emma would experience genuine luxury hospitality, while I maintained complete control over every aspect of her vacation. The total cost approached $35,000, more than Emma earned in an entire year from her part-time retail job and sporadic social media sponsorships. She'd requested an amazing trip without understanding what amazing actually cost when provided by someone with the expertise and industry access to deliver authentic luxury experiences. Sound of family communication. Emma is going to be so grateful, my Aunt Patricia had gushed when I called to confirm the vacation arrangements. This kind of opportunity could really transform her career prospects. You're giving her exactly what she needs to take her brand to the next level. What I'd actually given Emma was access to experiences that would expose exactly how unprepared she was for the luxury travel market she claimed to understand, while positioning myself to deliver consequences that would teach her about the difference between earning opportunities and expecting them. Emma's Bali vacation was going to provide her with content, education, and justice in ways she couldn't possibly anticipate. Emma's social media documentation of her Bali vacation provided real-time entertainment for anyone who understood the difference between authentic luxury travel and someone pretending to belong in spaces they'd never earned access to through their own efforts. Day one had produced Instagram stories of Emma attempting to look sophisticated while clearly overwhelmed by the level of service and attention to detail that characterized genuine five-star hospitality. Her captions revealed someone who'd never experienced luxury beyond basic hotel accommodations funded by family guilt trips. Living my best life at this incredible Bali resort. The butler service is so extra, but I'm totally here for it. Number luxury travel. Number influencer life. Number blessed and grateful. My industry contacts at the Amankila resort provided discreet updates about Emma's behavior that confirmed exactly what I'd suspected. She was treating five-star service like an all-inclusive party rather than understanding the cultural sophistication that luxury hospitality required from guests. Ms. Lancaster, your guest is certainly enthusiastic about documenting her experience. The housekeeping staff has mentioned some concerns about appropriate behavior during butler service, and the restaurant manager has requested guidance about menu selections that might be more suitable for her palate. Translation: Emma was behaving like someone who'd won a contest rather than someone who belonged in spaces that cost $3,000 per night. Her social media content was documenting not just luxury experiences, but her complete inability to navigate them with the sophistication that characterized people who could actually afford such accommodations. Meanwhile, her Instagram posts were attracting exactly the kind of attention that revealed how little her influencer career understood about authentic luxury travel marketing. Comments from her limited follower base consisted mainly of family members expressing pride and strangers asking basic questions about how she'd afforded such expensive accommodations. "So proud of you, Emma. You deserve this luxury." Aunt Patricia. Goals. How did you afford such an amazing trip? High school acquaintance. Living the dream. Can't wait to hear all about it. Various relatives. What Emma hadn't revealed to her social media audience was that her amazing luxury vacation was entirely funded by a family member she'd guilted into providing free travel consulting services while treating that person's professional expertise like a family favor rather than valuable industry skill. By day 5, Emma's social media content was revealing the fundamental problem with her approach to luxury travel. She was treating exceptional experiences like entertainment rather than understanding the cultural sophistication and appreciation that such experiences deserved from people who could actually afford them. That's when I implemented the second phase of Emma's education about the difference between earning luxury experiences and expecting them to be provided by relatives who'd actually built the success to afford such indulgences. Day 6 of Emma's luxury vacation began with a phone call that would transform her influencer content creation trip into a real-time lesson about the difference between earning opportunities and having them provided through family manipulation. Miss Emma Patterson? This is Kadik from the Amankila Resort front desk. We need to discuss some concerns about your reservation arrangements that require immediate attention. What kind of concerns? My cousin Sophia arranged everything. There shouldn't be any problems with my reservation. Ms. Patterson, we've received notification that the credit card associated with your reservation has been canceled, and we need alternative payment arrangements to continue your accommodation. The outstanding balance for your remaining 6 nights totals $18,000, not including charges for additional services you've requested. What Emma was experiencing was the inevitable consequence of treating professional expertise like a family favor, while assuming that generous relatives would continue funding lifestyle experiences indefinitely regardless of gratitude, respect, or basic courtesy. I'd timed the cancellation perfectly, far enough into her vacation that she'd experienced enough luxury to understand what she was losing, but with enough remaining time that the consequences would be appropriately educational rather than merely punitive. Emma's immediate response was exactly what I'd predicted. Frantic calls to family members seeking emergency financial rescue from the situation she'd created by treating my professional services like charity and my financial generosity like an obligation rather than a gift that required gratitude and respect. Mom, I need help immediately. Sophia canceled my hotel reservation, and they want $18,000 for the rest of my stay. I'm stuck in Bali with no money and nowhere to stay. This is completely insane. That can't be right, Emma. Sophia wouldn't just cancel your vacation without warning. There must be some misunderstanding about the payment arrangements. The family emergency calls revealed exactly what I'd expected. Emma had never disclosed the true cost of her business trip to relatives who'd encouraged my investment in her career, and she'd certainly never mentioned that she'd treated my professional travel planning services like unpaid family labor. When Emma finally called me directly, I was prepared with exactly the kind of professional response that someone in her situation deserved when they'd spent years treating successful family members like personal ATMs rather than accomplished professionals worthy of respect and gratitude. Sophia, what the hell is going on? The hotel says you canceled my reservation and I owe them $18,000. This was supposed to be a family investment in my career. You can't just leave me stranded in a foreign country. Emma, your vacation was a gift that I provided using my professional expertise and industry relationships, not a family investment or business partnership. Your behavior over the past 6 days has demonstrated exactly why you're not ready for the luxury travel market you claim to understand. I provided Emma with detailed documentation of her vacation costs, my professional services, and the industry relationships I'd leveraged to provide her with experiences that would have been impossible for someone with her limited resources and non-existent travel industry knowledge. The resort staff has reported behavior that's inappropriate for 5-star hospitality environments. Your social media content reveals someone who doesn't understand luxury travel culture, and your assumption that family members are obligated to fund your lifestyle without gratitude or respect has created exactly the situation you're currently experiencing. Emma's response to having her luxury vacation terminated mid-trip provided perfect demonstration of why she'd never earned the experiences she felt entitled to receive through family manipulation and emotional guilt. Rather than accepting responsibility for treating professional services like family favors and expensive gifts like obligations, Emma attempted to transform her situation into a family emergency that required collective rescue from consequences she'd created through her own entitled behavior. This is financial abuse, Emma declared during the emergency family conference call she'd demanded. Sophia deliberately trapped me in an expensive foreign country and is trying to extort money from me. She planned this whole thing to humiliate me. Emma, financial abuse would be manipulating family members into funding luxury vacations through guilt and emotional pressure while treating their professional expertise like unpaid labor. What you're experiencing is learning what happens when someone who controls hospitality industry relationships decides to stop enabling your pattern of entitlement. The emergency family meeting that followed Emma's crisis provided perfect opportunity to educate relatives who'd spent years encouraging Emma's manipulation tactics while pressuring successful family members to fund her lifestyle choices. For 15 years, I've built a travel consulting business that provides luxury experiences for clients who understand the value of professional expertise. Emma treated my services like family charity while expecting me to fund a $35,000 vacation that she presented as a business investment, rather than acknowledging it as the generous gift it actually was. I presented the family with complete documentation of Emma's vacation costs, my professional services, and the industry relationships required to provide someone with her limited resources access to experiences that cost more than most people's annual salary. Emma's social media documentation of this trip reveals someone who's completely unprepared for the luxury travel market she claims to understand. Her behavior at the resort demonstrated why she'd never earn access to such experiences through her own efforts. And her response to having consequences for treating generosity like obligation shows exactly why enabling her entitlement has been harmful to everyone involved. The meeting concluded with family members finally understanding that Emma's pattern of using guilt and manipulation to extract resources from successful relatives wasn't just annoying behavior. It was exploitation that prevented her from developing the skills and work ethic necessary to earn the lifestyle she felt entitled to receive. Fine. I'll figure out how to pay for my own hotel for the rest of the trip, but don't expect me to be grateful for being humiliated and abandoned in a foreign country. Emma, figuring out how to pay for experiences you want is exactly what adults do. And learning that treating people's generosity like obligation has consequences is education that's long overdue. Emma's luxury vacation education concluded with her discovering budget accommodation for her remaining time in Bali, funded by emergency money borrowed from multiple family members who finally understood that enabling her entitlement had prevented her from learning basic adult responsibility. 6 months after Emma's educational vacation termination, I was sitting in my expanded office, reviewing client contracts for luxury travel experiences that would generate more revenue in 1 month than Emma had earned in the previous 2 years from her influencer career. My boutique travel consulting business had grown significantly after the industry recognition I'd received for innovative educational hospitality experiences that taught entitled clients about the value of professional expertise and authentic luxury travel culture. Ms. Lancaster, your approach to client education has become legendary in luxury hospitality circles, explained the director of the International Luxury Travel Association during a conference honoring innovative travel professionals. Your case study about teaching appropriate gratitude and respect for professional services has been adopted by high-end resorts throughout Southeast Asia. Emma had eventually found employment as a customer service representative for a budget travel booking website, where her experience with luxury hospitality, however brief, made her valuable for handling customer complaints about service expectations versus budget realities. My family had gradually acknowledged that their encouragement of Emma's manipulation tactics had been harmful to everyone involved, particularly Emma herself, who'd never developed the skills necessary to earn the lifestyle she felt entitled to receive through family guilt and emotional pressure. Sophia, we owe you an apology for pressuring you to enable Emma's entitlement. We thought we were helping her, but we were actually preventing her from learning how to support herself and treat other people's generosity with appropriate respect. The most important lesson isn't about my professional boundaries. It's about understanding that real family support means encouraging competence and gratitude rather than enabling manipulation and entitlement. I'd also begun offering specialized consulting services for luxury hospitality providers who wanted to educate entitled guests about appropriate behavior and cultural sophistication required in five-star environments. My educational luxury experiences had become popular among resorts seeking to maintain standards while teaching valuable lessons about respect and gratitude. The family that had pressured me to fund Emma's luxury vacation through guilt and obligation had learned that professional expertise deserved respect. Generous gifts required gratitude, and enabling entitlement was more expensive than teaching responsibility. Emma had thought she'd manipulated me into funding another luxury vacation by weaponizing family guilt and treating my professional services like charity. Instead, she'd provided perfect opportunity to demonstrate what happened when someone who controlled hospitality industry relationships decided to deliver education rather than enable entitlement. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just canceling someone's vacation, it's teaching them exactly why they'd never earned the experiences they felt entitled to receive, while building something so successful that their manipulation tactics become completely powerless. They'd called me selfish for setting professional boundaries. I'd used those boundaries to create educational experiences that transformed industry standards. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give an entitled family member is the opportunity to learn that luxury experiences must be earned rather than expected, and that treating generosity like obligation has consequences that no amount of family guilt can prevent. The family meeting was called for Sunday dinner at my parents' house, with the kind of formal invitation that usually meant someone was getting married, divorced, or had received life-changing medical news. What I didn't expect was to watch my parents hand my 32-year-old brother a check for $100,000 to help him get back on his feet, while explaining that my request for a business loan had been denied because I was too ambitious for my own good. My name is Dr. Alexandra Martinez, and for 8 years I'd been building a successful medical practice while watching my family enable my brother Tony's pattern of failed ventures, abandoned responsibilities, and financial disasters that somehow always required bailouts from our parents' retirement savings. What my family had forgotten when they decided I was too ambitious to deserve support was that I wasn't just their daughter asking for help. I was a physician who understood exactly how family dynamics could be systematically poisoned by favoritism and financial manipulation. Their $100,000 investment in Tony's latest failure was about to become the catalyst for demonstrating what real ambition could accomplish when properly motivated. My parents thought they were protecting their son while teaching their daughter a lesson about knowing her place. What they were actually doing was providing a successful medical professional with perfect motivation to show them exactly what happened when you bet against someone who'd spent a decade proving that ambition and competence could overcome any obstacle. Picture this: the same dining room where I'd announced my acceptance to medical school, celebrated graduating with honors, and shared news about establishing my own practice. The Martinez family had gathered for what my mother called an important family discussion about supporting each other through challenging times. Tony sat at his usual place at the table, looking like a man approaching middle age who'd never quite figured out how to be an adult. His latest business venture, a food truck specializing in artisanal fusion tacos, had failed spectacularly after 6 months, leaving him $80,000 in debt and facing bankruptcy. Tony's been going through a rough patch, but he's learned from his mistakes. This new opportunity in real estate development could really be his breakthrough if he has the right support. We've decided to help Tony with a fresh start. $100,000 should be enough to pay off his debts and give him capital to invest in this property development course he's excited about. I watched my parents hand Tony a check that represented 2 years of their retirement savings, presented with the kind of ceremony usually reserved for graduation gifts or wedding contributions. Tony accepted it with the casual entitlement of someone who'd been bailed out so many times that financial rescue had become an expected family service. This was the same Tony who'd dropped out of college twice, quit 7 jobs in 5 years, and had been living in our parents' basement for the past 18 months while pursuing various entrepreneurial opportunities that consistently failed due to what he called market conditions beyond his control. "Now, Alexandra," my father continued, "we know you've been asking about a loan for expanding your practice, but we need to discuss some concerns about your approach to business and family priorities." "My approach to business?" "Sweetheart, you've become so focused on career advancement that you're forgetting what's really important. You're 34 years old, unmarried, working 60-hour weeks. Maybe instead of expanding your practice, you should be focusing on finding a good husband and starting a family." What followed was a 20-minute lecture about how my ambition was unnatural for a woman my age, how my success was making me intimidating to potential partners, and how investing in my practice expansion would only encourage more unhealthy prioritization of career over family. "Tony needs this help because he's trying to build something that will support a future family. You already have a stable income, Alexandra. Your mother and I think you're too ambitious for your own good. You need to learn that there are more important things than professional achievement." I sat in stunned silence, processing the fact that my parents had just handed my chronically failing brother $100,000 while explaining that my successful medical practice made me unworthy of support because ambition was apparently a character flaw in daughters, but an entrepreneurial virtue in sons. The meeting ended with Tony thanking our parents for believing in his potential, while they advised me to consider what really matters and maybe join a church group or volunteer organization where you might meet a nice man who isn't threatened by successful women. That evening, driving home from my parents' house, I understood something profound about family dynamics and gender expectations. Tony's repeated failures were treated as temporary setbacks requiring investment and support. My sustained success was treated as a problem requiring correction and redirection. But what my family had failed to consider was that they'd just provided a motivated physician with perfect inspiration to demonstrate exactly what too ambitious could accomplish when channeled toward proving them catastrophically wrong about their investment choices. Monday morning found me in my medical office, reviewing patient charts while processing the family dinner revelation with the same analytical approach I applied to complex medical cases. My parents' financial decision wasn't just misguided favoritism, it was a symptom of systematic dysfunction that required comprehensive evaluation. I'd spent the weekend researching Tony's business history with the thoroughness I applied to patient diagnosis. His pattern of failure wasn't random bad luck. It was predictable outcome of poor planning, inadequate research, and unrealistic expectations enabled by family bailouts that prevented him from learning from consequences. The food truck failure had been entirely avoidable. Tony had never researched local licensing requirements, health department regulations, or basic financial planning that would have revealed his business model was unsustainable from the start. When reality conflicted with his expectations, he'd simply abandoned the venture and expected our parents to absorb the financial consequences. This pattern repeated across every business opportunity Tony had pursued over the past decade. The landscaping company that failed because he'd never learned to manage employees. The online retail venture that collapsed because he'd ignored inventory management and customer service. The construction business that ended when he'd discovered manual labor was harder than he'd expected. Each failure had been followed by our parents' financial rescue, accompanied by explanations about learning experiences and character building that justified continued investment in someone who'd never demonstrated capacity for sustained effort or business competence. Meanwhile, My medical practice was achieving exactly the kind of success that my parents claimed made me too ambitious. I'd built a patient base of over 2,000 people, maintained hospital privileges at 3 facilities, and established a reputation for diagnostic accuracy that attracted referrals from colleagues throughout the region. The practice expansion I'd requested funding for wasn't ambitious fantasy. It was strategic growth based on documented demand, comprehensive financial planning, and proven track record of success. I'd presented my parents with business plans, financial projections, and market analysis that would have impressed any legitimate investor. But their response to my success had been concern rather than pride, criticism rather than support. My achievements were treated as evidence of misplaced priorities rather than demonstration of competence and work ethic that should have earned confidence in my business judgment. That's when I understood exactly how to respond to my family's $100,000 investment in Tony's latest failure, while teaching them the difference between real ambition and entitled incompetence. I wasn't going to argue with their decision or request reconsideration of their loan denial. Instead, I was going to use their favoritism as motivation to demonstrate what genuine business success looked like when achieved through competence rather than family bailouts. My parents had bet $100,000 on Tony's potential while dismissing my proven track record. Now, I was going to show them exactly what happened when you invested in someone who understood how to turn professional expertise into sustainable wealth rather than just another failure requiring rescue. Within 2 weeks of my family's dinner revelation, I'd secured a $200,000 business loan from a bank that understood the difference between investing in proven success and enabling systematic failure. My business plan, credit history, and practice revenue made me exactly the kind of client that legitimate lenders compete to support. The expansion project I'd designed would add 2 additional physicians to my practice, implement telemedicine capabilities for remote consultations, and establish satellite clinics in underserved communities where my expertise could generate both revenue and genuine social impact. Dr. Martinez, your financial projections are remarkably conservative, my loan officer had observed during our final approval meeting. Based on your current patient growth and referral patterns, we project you'll exceed these revenue targets within 18 months. I prefer to underpromise and overdeliver. My family taught me to be very careful about financial commitments and business planning. The loan approval process had been refreshingly straightforward because I'd provided exactly the kind of documentation that serious business ventures require. Detailed financial statements, market analysis, professional references, and realistic timelines based on actual research rather than optimistic assumptions. Everything Tony had never provided during his various requests for family investment, I'd presented to professional lenders who evaluated business proposals based on merit rather than family guilt and emotional manipulation. Within 3 months, my expanded practice was exceeding every projection I'd shared with the bank. The additional physicians were generating enough revenue to cover their salaries, plus significant profit margins. The telemedicine program was attracting patients from rural areas who'd previously lacked access to specialized care. But the most satisfying element wasn't just the financial success. It was receiving recognition from medical organizations, community health boards, and professional associations that understood the value of expanding healthcare access through innovative business models. Dr. Martinez, your satellite clinic program has become a model for rural healthcare delivery, explained Dr. Patricia Wong from the State Medical Board during a ceremony honoring innovative medical practices. You've demonstrated how professional ambition can serve both business success and community welfare. Professional ambition, it turned out, created outcomes that benefited entire communities rather than just requiring bailouts from retirement savings. My unhealthy prioritization of career was providing medical care to underserved populations, while generating sustainable wealth through competent business management. Meanwhile, I maintained careful documentation of Tony's latest venture into real estate development education. The $100,000 investment my parents had provided was being consumed by expensive seminars, coaching programs, and business development courses that promised to teach him skills he could have learned through basic research and community college classes. My family's concern about my ambition was being disproven by every metric that mattered: financial success, professional recognition, community impact, and sustainable growth based on competence rather than family welfare. But I wasn't going to confront them with evidence of my success while they watched Tony's predictable failure. I was going to wait until the contrast between their investment choices became impossible to ignore, then provide them with education about the difference between real achievement and enabled dependency. 6 months after my parents' $100,000 investment in Tony's real estate development breakthrough, his latest venture was following the same trajectory as every previous business opportunity: initial enthusiasm, gradual reality contact, and eventual acknowledgement that success required sustained effort rather than magical thinking. The expensive real estate courses had taught Tony basic concepts about property investment, but implementing those concepts required capital, credit rating, and business acumen that he'd never developed through his pattern of abandoned ventures and family bailouts. "Alexandra, we're worried about Tony," my mother confided during one of her increasingly frequent check-in calls. "The real estate program was supposed to provide him with income opportunities, but he's having trouble finding properties that meet the investment criteria he learned about." "Real estate investment does require significant due diligence and financial analysis. Has Tony identified specific properties he's evaluating?" "Well, the properties in our price range don't seem to meet the standards his course instructors recommend. He's learned that successful real estate development requires much more capital than we initially understood." Translation: Tony had discovered that real estate investment required research, financial planning, and sustained effort. Exactly the skills he'd never developed during his pattern of failed ventures and family rescue operations. "The real estate market is more competitive than Tony's instructors indicated," my father explained during our next family gathering. "He's going to need additional capital to access the kinds of opportunities that provide meaningful returns." "How much additional capital?" "Well, his business coach suggests that serious real estate investment requires at least $250,000 to access properties with genuine development potential." I watched my parents process the reality that their $100,000 investment had purchased Tony expensive education about why he wasn't qualified for the business he'd claimed to understand. Rather than generating income, their support had created awareness of how much more support he'd need to pursue opportunities that remained beyond his competence level. Meanwhile, my medical practice continued expanding with the kind of sustainable growth that my parents had dismissed as too ambitious. The satellite clinics were generating regional recognition for innovative healthcare delivery. The telemedicine program had attracted partnership offers from larger medical organizations. My business loan was being repaid ahead of schedule with profits that exceeded every conservative projection. "Dr. Martinez, we'd like to feature your practice expansion as a case study in our business development program," explained the director of the Regional Medical Association. "Your model of combining profitable growth with community health impact represents exactly the kind of physician leadership we want to encourage." That's when I realized it was time to provide my family with education about the difference between their investment in Tony's pattern of failure and my achievement through sustained competence and professional ambition. The second family meeting was scheduled 3 months later, ostensibly to discuss Tony's next steps and evaluate family financial priorities. What my parents were actually facing was the inevitable conversation about why their $100,000 investment had produced education rather than income. Tony appeared significantly less confident than during the previous family meeting. His real estate education had apparently taught him enough to understand how unprepared he was for the business he'd claimed to master through weekend seminars and motivational coaching. The real estate market is more complex than the course materials indicated. The properties available in our investment range don't meet the cash flow requirements for sustainable development. I need to reassess my approach. We're concerned about Tony's confidence level, my mother explained. Perhaps he needs more time to develop his skills before pursuing independent real estate ventures. Or perhaps Tony needs to acknowledge that real estate development requires business skills that can't be purchased through expensive seminars and family bailouts. The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in years, someone had stated directly that Tony's pattern of failure might reflect personal incompetence rather than external market conditions or insufficient family support. Tony has now received over $200,000 in family financial support across multiple business ventures over the past decade. Each failure has been followed by explanations about market conditions, timing, or insufficient capital rather than acknowledgement that sustained business success requires skills Tony has never developed. I opened the portfolio I'd prepared with the same thoroughness I applied to complex medical case presentations. Tony's business history, documented failures, and pattern of family dependency, all analyzed with the clinical objectivity I'd learned during medical training. Meanwhile, the medical practice expansion that you dismissed as too ambitious has generated $400,000 in revenue over the past year, while providing healthcare access to underserved communities. My business loan is being repaid ahead of schedule, with profits that support both practice growth and community health initiatives. I presented awards, recognition letters, patient satisfaction surveys, and financial statements that demonstrated exactly what professional ambition could accomplish when applied through competence rather than entitlement. You invested $100,000 in Tony's latest failure, while explaining that my success made me too ambitious for help. What you actually demonstrated was that you'd rather enable incompetence than support achievement, apparently because my professional success didn't align with your expectations about women's priorities. But here's what you failed to understand. Real ambition doesn't require family bailouts because it generates sustainable success through competence. Your concern about my career focus was actually concern that I'd outgrown the need for approval from people who mistake enabling for supporting. The family meeting ended with my parents finally acknowledging that their investment strategy had been based on gender expectations rather than business merit, and that their definition of appropriate ambition had been designed to limit their daughter's success rather than encourage their son's competence. Tony's real estate education had cost them $100,000 and taught him that he wasn't qualified for business ventures that required sustained effort. My medical practice expansion had cost them nothing and demonstrated that professional ambition could create wealth while serving community needs. 2 years after my family's dinner revelation about being too ambitious for help, I was sitting in the boardroom of Martinez Medical Group, reviewing acquisition proposals from hospital systems that wanted to purchase my expanded practice for significantly more than any real estate investment Tony could have imagined. The practice I'd built without family support had grown into a regional medical network employing 47 healthcare professionals and serving over 8,000 patients across multiple clinics. My unhealthy ambition had created sustainable wealth while providing healthcare access that improved entire communities. I'd been invited to speak at medical conferences about innovative practice management, featured in healthcare journals as an example of physician entrepreneurship, and offered board positions with medical organizations that recognized my expertise in combining profitable growth with community health impact. Tony had eventually found employment as a sales representative for the real estate education company that had consumed my parents' $100,000 investment. His income was steady but modest, and he'd moved out of our parents' basement into a rental apartment that reflected the reality of supporting himself through actual work rather than family bailouts. My parents had gradually acknowledged that their concerns about my ambition had been based on outdated expectations about women's professional roles rather than legitimate business analysis. They'd come to understand that Tony's repeated failures weren't bad luck, but predictable consequences of incompetence enabled by family rescue operations. "Alexandra, we owe you an apology," my mother had said during our last family dinner. "We were wrong about your ambition being unhealthy. We were wrong about Tony needing more support than guidance. And we were wrong about what kinds of success deserve family investment." I appreciate that acknowledgement, but the most important lesson isn't about my success. It's about understanding that real support means encouraging competence rather than enabling dependency. I'd also begun dating again, this time attracting partners who were inspired rather than intimidated by professional success. Men who understood that ambition in women was attractive rather than threatening, and who wanted to build relationships with accomplished partners rather than dependent ones. The family that had gifted my loser brother $100,000 while dismissing my ambition as excessive had learned that investment decisions should be based on competence rather than gender expectations, and that enabling failure was more expensive than supporting success. My parents had thought they were protecting their son while teaching their daughter about appropriate priorities. Instead, they'd provided perfect motivation for demonstrating that real ambition creates sustainable wealth through competence, rather than consuming family resources through incompetence. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving your family wrong about your limitations. It's proving them wrong about their investment strategy while building something so successful that their approval becomes irrelevant. They'd called me too ambitious for help. I'd used that ambition to build something too successful to need their help. And sometimes the greatest gift a family can give you is the motivation to prove exactly how much they underestimated your potential. The security footage arrived in my email at 9:23 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, sent by my friend Keisha, who worked in building management downtown. "Girl, I think you need to see this," her message read, followed by a timestamp from the previous evening showing my husband Marcus entering the office building's parking garage with a woman who definitely wasn't me. My name is Denise Washington, and for 12 years, I'd been married to Marcus Washington, a senior project manager at Henderson and Associates, one of Atlanta's most prestigious marketing firms. While he climbed the corporate ladder, I'd been building my own career as a strategic communications consultant, working with nonprofits and small businesses that couldn't afford big agency prices. What Marcus didn't know was that his workplace affair with his assistant was being documented by building security cameras, witnessed by my professional network, and observed by someone who understood exactly how corporate hierarchies worked. His after-hours strategy sessions were about to become the foundation for my own strategic career advancement. Marcus thought he could conduct his affair at his prestigious job, while I remained focused on my smaller-scale consulting work. What he was about to discover was that some wives don't just catch their husbands cheating, they use that information to systematically dismantle their careers while building something bigger than anything the cheater ever imagined. Picture this: a brick colonial in Decatur, where Marcus and I had built what everyone considered the ideal Black professional marriage. He'd leave each morning in his tailored suits, driving his BMW to Henderson and Associates' Buckhead office, while I worked from our converted basement office, managing campaigns for community organizations and small businesses across Metro Atlanta. My consulting work focused on organizations that needed strategic communications but couldn't afford big agency retainers. I'd help churches launch community programs, assist small businesses with crisis management, and work with activist groups on public relations campaigns that required both creativity and cultural competency. "Mrs. Patterson, the media strategy we're implementing for your daycare's expansion should generate community support while addressing any zoning concerns proactively. I'd explain to clients who trusted me to navigate complex situations with limited budgets but unlimited passion for their missions. I'd built a reputation for turning challenges into opportunities, though I'd never imagined needing to apply those skills to my own marriage. Marcus's career at Henderson and Associates had been everything we'd planned when we'd first married. He'd started as an account coordinator and worked his way up to senior project manager, handling campaigns for major corporations that trusted Henderson with million-dollar advertising budgets. "The Samsung campaign is really taking off," Marcus would tell me over dinner, describing client presentations and strategy meetings that kept him at the office until 9 or 10 p.m. several nights each week. "Henderson is positioning me for the creative director role that's opening up next quarter." Those late nights had become more frequent over the past 6 months, always explained by client demands and deadline pressures that required all hands on deck for campaigns that seemed to require Marcus's personal attention more than anyone else's. But here's the thing about being a strategic communications consultant. You develop instincts about when narratives don't align with observable evidence. When someone's behavior patterns change dramatically while their explanations remain consistently vague, you start applying professional skepticism to personal situations. I'd started paying closer attention to Henderson and Associates' public campaigns and client announcements, cross-referencing Marcus's reported project timelines with the agency's actual work output. What I discovered was that many of his urgent client meetings didn't correspond with any publicly documented campaign activities. The Samsung campaign he'd been discussing for months had actually wrapped up 6 weeks earlier, according to Henderson's own case study publications. The high-pressure deadlines that required his evening presence weren't reflected in any client work that I could verify through industry publications or social media coverage. That's when Keisha's email arrived with security footage that explained exactly what Marcus had been doing during those late-night strategy sessions that had nothing to do with client work and everything to do with after-hours activities that violated both his marriage vows and his company's professional conduct policies. The woman in the parking garage footage was Jasmine Collins, Marcus's administrative assistant, someone I'd met at company holiday parties and who'd always been professionally friendly while maintaining appropriate boundaries. Apparently, those boundaries had shifted significantly during the past 6 months of Marcus's mysterious overtime schedule. Marcus thought he could conduct his affair at his prestigious job while I remained focused on my nonprofit consulting work. What he didn't understand was that his workplace infidelity had just provided a strategic communications specialist with the perfect opportunity to demonstrate what happened when you underestimated someone who understood exactly how to turn professional scandals into career opportunities. The security footage was just the beginning of what became the most comprehensive corporate intelligence gathering operation of my career. If Marcus was conducting his affair at Henderson and Associates, I needed to understand exactly how that workplace dynamic was affecting his professional relationships and potentially creating opportunities for someone with superior strategic thinking. I started with Henderson and Associates' corporate structure, using the same research techniques I employed for clients who needed to understand organizational dynamics before launching public relations campaigns. LinkedIn profiles, corporate announcements, industry publications, everything that revealed how the agency operated and who held decision-making authority. What I discovered was that Henderson and Associates was facing significant challenges that Marcus had never mentioned during his detailed reports about company success and his own advancement opportunities. 3 major clients had ended their contracts in the past year, 2 senior partners had left to start competing firms, and the agency was actively seeking new leadership to stabilize operations. The creative director position that Marcus claimed to be pursuing was actually being advertised externally, because Henderson's leadership had determined that their internal candidates lacked the strategic vision necessary to rebuild the agency's reputation and client base. But the most interesting discovery was that Henderson and Associates had recently announced a new focus on culturally competent communications and community-centered marketing strategies exactly the expertise I'd been developing through 8 years of nonprofit consulting and small business strategic communications work. Using my professional network, I began gathering intelligence about Henderson's internal culture, client challenges, and strategic needs. What I learned was that Marcus's affair with Jasmine wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a professional liability that could destroy his career if it became known to agency leadership, who were already concerned about workplace conduct and employee professionalism. Henderson is struggling with authentic community engagement, explained Tanya Williams, a former Henderson employee who'd left for a competing agency. Their campaigns keep getting criticized for lacking cultural competency, especially when they try to reach Black and Latino markets. They need someone who understands how to build genuine community relationships. That someone was sitting in a basement office in Decatur, building exactly the kind of portfolio that Henderson and Associates desperately needed, while her husband conducted affairs with colleagues during company time. I spent the next 2 weeks documenting Marcus's affair with the same thoroughness I applied to crisis management campaigns for clients facing public relations disasters. Security footage timestamps, credit card receipts from restaurants near Henderson's office, and documented patterns of behavior that proved systematic workplace misconduct. But I wasn't planning to confront Marcus or expose his affair to his colleagues. Instead, I was going to use my evidence as insurance while applying for the creative director position that he thought he was qualified for, but had never actually been considered to receive. Marcus had provided me with perfect leverage for the most strategic career move of my life, one that would demonstrate exactly what happened when you betrayed someone who understood how to turn professional scandals into personal advancement opportunities. The Henderson and Associates creative director position required exactly the kind of strategic communications expertise I'd been developing for 8 years, but with one significant advantage over other candidates. I had insider knowledge about the agency's culture, challenges, and personnel issues that no external applicant could possess. I assembled a portfolio that would have impressed any marketing professional, but designed specifically to address Henderson's documented weaknesses in community engagement and culturally competent communications. Case studies from my nonprofit work, testimonials from small business clients, and strategic frameworks that demonstrated exactly the kind of thinking Henderson needed to rebuild their reputation. The application package I submitted highlighted my success in building authentic relationships with diverse communities, creating campaigns that generated genuine engagement rather than superficial corporate messaging, and managing crisis communications that turned challenges into opportunities for organizational growth. But the most strategic element of my application wasn't what I included, it was what I omitted. No mention of my marriage to Marcus Washington, no reference to my familiarity with Henderson's internal operations, and no indication that I possessed information about workplace conduct issues that could affect agency stability. The interview request arrived within a week, along with information about Henderson's accelerated hiring timeline due to urgent strategic needs that required immediate creative director leadership. They were looking for someone who could start quickly and make immediate impact on client relationships and campaign effectiveness. The interview took place in Henderson's Buckhead conference room, the same building where Marcus conducted his affair, though the executive team had no idea they were interviewing the wife of one of their project managers who was systematically violating company policy. Ms. Washington, your portfolio demonstrates exactly the kind of community engagement expertise we need, explained Sarah Henderson, the agency's managing partner. Our clients are demanding more authentic connections with diverse markets, and your track record shows sustained success in building those relationships. Thank you, Ms. Henderson. I've noticed that many agencies struggle with authentic community engagement because they approach it as a marketing tactic rather than genuine relationship building. My work focuses on understanding community needs first, then developing communication strategies that serve those needs while achieving client objectives. The presentation I delivered that afternoon demonstrated strategic thinking that addressed every weakness in Henderson's current approach, while showcasing expertise that exceeded anything their internal candidates could provide. I walked them through campaign strategies that could rebuild their reputation while attracting exactly the kind of clients they needed to stabilize operations. "We'd like to make you an offer," Sarah Henderson concluded at the end of my presentation. "The creative director position, starting Monday, with authority over all strategic campaigns and supervisory responsibility for project management staff. Project management staff that included my husband, who had no idea his wife had just been hired as his new boss while he was conducting workplace affairs that violated every aspect of professional conduct policy. I accepted Henderson's offer that afternoon, negotiating a salary that exceeded Marcus's income by 40% and securing reporting relationships that would give me direct authority over his work assignments, performance evaluations, and continued employment at the agency. Marcus thought he could conduct his affair at his prestigious job while I remained focused on smaller consulting clients. What he was about to discover was that his workplace misconduct had provided his wife with the perfect opportunity to become his professional superior while possessing documented evidence of his policy violations. Monday morning arrived with the kind of professional excitement I hadn't felt since starting my own consulting business 8 years earlier. I dressed in my most authoritative business attire and drove to Henderson and Associates' Buckhead office, arriving early to set up my new corner office before the staff meeting where I'd be introduced as their new creative director. Sarah Henderson had scheduled an all-hands meeting for 9:30 a.m. to introduce me to the full team and outline my strategic vision for the agency's new direction. Marcus had mentioned the meeting during breakfast, complaining about another mandatory corporate gathering that would interrupt his project schedule. "Some new creative director starting today?" He'd grumbled over coffee. "Probably another outsider who doesn't understand how things work here. Hope they don't mess up the Samsung follow-up campaign I'm developing. I'm sure they'll bring interesting perspectives to the agency," I'd replied, kissing his cheek goodbye. "You might be surprised by what new leadership can accomplish." The staff meeting began with Sarah Henderson's introduction of my background, expertise, and strategic vision for Henderson and Associates' evolution into an agency that specialized in authentic community engagement and culturally competent communications. I'm pleased to introduce Denise Washington as our new creative director. Her portfolio demonstrates exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need to rebuild our client relationships and expand into markets where authentic community connections are essential. I watched Marcus's face from across the conference room as he processed hearing my name called as his new supervisor. His expression shifted through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror as he realized that his wife had just been introduced as his boss while he'd been conducting an affair with his assistant during company time. "Thank you, Sarah. I'm excited to work with such a talented team to develop campaigns that serve both client objectives and community needs. My first priority will be reviewing all current projects to ensure they align with our new strategic direction." I outlined my vision for Henderson's transformation, discussing campaign strategies that would rebuild their reputation while attracting clients who valued authentic engagement over superficial corporate messaging. Marcus sat frozen in his chair, probably calculating exactly how much trouble he was in professionally and personally. "I'll be meeting individually with each team member this week to discuss their current projects and identify opportunities for strategic improvement," I continued, making direct eye contact with Marcus. "I believe in understanding every aspect of our operations to ensure optimal performance and professional conduct." After the general meeting, I announced that I'd be conducting one-on-one sessions with senior staff members, starting with project managers who had the most direct client contact and supervisory responsibilities. "Marcus Washington, could you schedule time this afternoon to discuss your current project portfolio and strategic approaches?" I'd like to understand your work style and professional priorities. Marcus nodded silently, probably trying to figure out how to navigate having his wife as his boss while maintaining his affair with his assistant, who was now also under my supervisory authority. That afternoon's meeting would be the first time in our 12-year marriage that I'd held professional authority over my husband, while possessing documented evidence of his systematic violation of workplace conduct policies. Marcus had thought he could conduct his affair at his prestigious job, while I remained focused on smaller consulting work. Instead, his workplace misconduct had just placed him under the professional authority of someone who understood exactly how to use corporate power structures to ensure appropriate consequences for policy violations. The one-on-one meeting with Marcus was scheduled for 3 p.m. in my new corner office, the same floor where he'd been conducting his affair, but now under the authority of someone who possessed both professional power and personal knowledge of his misconduct. Marcus entered my office with the kind of nervous energy I'd seen from clients who knew they were facing public relations crises, but weren't sure how much damage had already been done to their reputations. Miss Washington, I need to say that this situation is incredibly awkward. I had no idea you were interviewing here, and I'm not sure how to handle the professional dynamics. Marcus, let's focus on your work performance and current project portfolio. Personal relationships don't factor into professional evaluations unless they affect workplace conduct or company policy compliance. I opened the file I'd prepared containing Marcus's project history, client feedback, and performance metrics over the past year. But I also had another file, one containing security footage, timeline documentation, and evidence of workplace misconduct that violated Henderson's professional conduct policies. Your project management work has been adequate, though several clients have noted concerns about responsiveness and availability during supposed intensive work periods. I'm particularly interested in understanding your time management during evening hours when you've reported extensive client work. My client dedication has always been exceptional. I stay late because I care about delivering quality work, not because of any performance issues. Marcus, I have security footage from the building's parking garage showing your client dedication activities. Would you like to discuss how your after-hours conduct aligns with Henderson's professional standards? The silence that followed was profound. Marcus realized that his wife wasn't just his new boss. She was his new boss who possessed evidence of his affair and had the professional authority to act on that information. Denise, please. We need to separate personal issues from professional responsibilities. Whatever problems we have in our marriage shouldn't affect my job. Marcus, this isn't about our marriage. This is about documented violations of workplace conduct policies that create liability for Henderson and Associates. Your affair with your assistant represents exactly the kind of professional misconduct that damages agency reputation and client relationships. I placed copies of security footage timestamps, documented patterns of after-hours building access, and evidence of workplace relationship violations on my desk between us. You have two options. You can resign immediately with a neutral reference that doesn't mention conduct violations, or you can face formal disciplinary proceedings that will document your policy violations in your permanent employment record. You're firing me because I cheated on you? I'm offering you the opportunity to resign because you violated company policy by conducting personal relationships on company property during company time while holding a supervisory position over the person you are having an affair with. This represents multiple violations of professional conduct standards that could result in immediate termination and negative references. Marcus stared at the evidence of his misconduct, finally understanding that his affair hadn't just destroyed his marriage, it had provided his wife with legitimate professional grounds for ending his career while advancing her own. I'll need your decision by 5 p.m. today, I concluded. HR will need to process your departure and transfer your project responsibilities to other team members who can maintain appropriate professional boundaries. Marcus had thought he could conduct his affair at his prestigious job, while I remained focused on smaller consulting work. Instead, his workplace misconduct had just made me his boss and given me professional authority to ensure he faced appropriate consequences for violating policies that protected both the company and its employees. Marcus submitted his resignation at 4:47 p.m. that afternoon, accompanied by a formal letter acknowledging policy violations and requesting confidential handling of his departure. By 5 p.m., I was meeting with Henderson's leadership team to discuss reassigning his project portfolio and implementing new professional conduct training for all staff members. "Denise, your handling of this situation demonstrates exactly the kind of leadership we need," Sarah Henderson acknowledged during our emergency session. Marcus's conduct violations could have created serious liability issues if they hadn't been addressed immediately and professionally. Within a week, I'd restructured Henderson's project management systems, implemented new accountability measures, and begun recruiting team members who shared my vision for authentic community engagement rather than superficial corporate messaging. The Samsung follow-up campaign that Marcus had been developing was redesigned using community-centered strategies that generated better client response and authentic engagement than anything Henderson had produced in years. My first-month performance reviews exceeded every expectation Sarah Henderson had outlined during my interview process. But the most satisfying element wasn't just the career advancement. It was watching how workplace dynamics improved once professional conduct standards were consistently enforced rather than selectively ignored based on personal relationships and workplace favoritism. Jasmine Collins, Marcus's former assistant, was reassigned to projects that utilized her administrative skills without the complications of inappropriate supervisor relationships. She actually thrived in the new environment where professional boundaries were clearly defined and consistently maintained. "Ms. Washington, I want to thank you for handling the situation professionally. I was uncomfortable with how things had developed with Mr. Washington, but I didn't know how to address it without risking my job." "Jasmine, part of my role is ensuring that all employees can work in an environment free from inappropriate conduct or pressure. If you ever face similar situations in the future, please know that reporting them is protected and encouraged." 6 months later, Henderson and Associates had secured 4 major new clients who specifically sought our expertise in culturally competent communications and authentic community engagement. My strategic vision had transformed the agency from a struggling firm losing clients to a growing organization that specialized in exactly the kind of work I'd been developing through 8 years of nonprofit consulting. I'd also been invited to speak at industry conferences about ethical leadership in marketing communications and building authentic community partnerships, sharing expertise that positioned Henderson as a thought leader in responsible marketing practices. The divorce proceedings with Marcus were straightforward since his affair was documented, and his resignation had eliminated any financial entanglement through shared employment. His new job at a smaller agency paid significantly less and provided none of the prestige he'd enjoyed at Henderson. I'd also started dating again, specifically other professionals who understood the importance of workplace integrity and who respected partners with career ambitions and leadership capabilities rather than viewing professional success as threatening to their ego or masculine identity. "I have to ask," David Chen had said during dinner at a restaurant I could easily afford with my creative director salary, "how did you manage to turn your husband's affair into the best career opportunity of your life?" I realized that Marcus's workplace misconduct wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was evidence of poor professional judgment that created opportunities for someone with superior strategic thinking and ethical leadership capabilities. 2 years after catching Marcus cheating at his job and applying to become his boss, I was sitting in Henderson and Associates' boardroom reviewing our acquisition offer from a major advertising conglomerate that wanted to purchase our expertise in authentic community engagement and ethical marketing practices. Under my leadership, Henderson had grown from a struggling agency losing clients to the most sought-after communications firm in the Southeast, specializing in campaigns that built genuine community relationships while achieving exceptional results for corporate clients who valued social responsibility alongside profit margins. Marcus had found employment with a smaller marketing firm where his project management skills were adequate for less complex campaigns, though his career advancement had been permanently limited by his resignation from Henderson under conduct violation circumstances that followed him through industry networking. He'd also remarried, a woman who worked in real estate and apparently shared his views about appropriate workplace boundaries and professional conduct. Their relationship seemed to function well within traditional dynamics where neither partner held professional authority over the other. My transformation of Henderson and Associates had become a case study taught in business schools about ethical leadership and strategic crisis management. My approach to turning workplace conduct violations into opportunities for organizational improvement had influenced industry standards for professional behavior and accountability. The most unexpected outcome had been the relationship that developed between Jasmine and me. She'd completed her marketing degree while working at Henderson and had become one of our most effective account coordinators, specializing in campaigns for women-owned businesses and community organizations. Ms. Washington, I want you to know that your leadership taught me what professional respect actually looks like, Jasmine had told me during her recent performance review. Before you arrived, I didn't understand that workplace relationships should be based on competence and mutual respect rather than power imbalances and personal manipulation. The acquisition offer we were reviewing would make me a millionaire while establishing Henderson as the foundation for a new division focused on ethical marketing and authentic community engagement. My expertise in turning challenges into opportunities had created wealth and professional influence that exceeded anything Marcus had achieved during his career at the agency. Marcus had thought he could conduct his affair at his prestigious job while I remained focused on smaller consulting work. Instead, his workplace misconduct had provided me with the perfect opportunity to demonstrate what happened when superior strategic thinking met professional authority and ethical leadership. I'd caught my husband cheating at his job, so I'd applied to be his new boss. By the time he realized what had happened, I was already transforming his workplace into something better than anything he could have built through corner cutting and policy violations. Sometimes the best revenge isn't personal, it's professional. It's using someone's misconduct as a stepping stone to achieve exactly the kind of success they never had the vision or integrity to pursue themselves. Marcus had bet against his wife's professional capabilities while violating workplace conduct standards. I'd used his poor judgment to build an empire that demonstrated the difference between real leadership and mere position holding. And the most beautiful part? I'd done it all through legitimate professional excellence rather than misconduct, policy violations, or ethical shortcuts. Some people build careers through competence. Others destroy them through stupidity. Marcus had chosen his approach. I'd chosen mine. The diary fell out of Madison's backpack when she was rushing to catch her ride home, pages scattering across our marble foyer like secrets demanding to be exposed. I bent to gather them, expecting to find the typical teenage thoughts about boys, school drama, and weekend plans. Instead, what I discovered was meticulous documentation of my husband's affair, detailed financial analysis of our family's assets, and a systematic plan to destroy our marriage that had been operating under our roof for 8 months. My name is Catherine Blackwood, and for 12 years I'd been building what I thought was the perfect life. Successful interior design business, beautiful home in Westchester County, devoted husband who was a partner at a prestigious Manhattan law firm, and 2 children who were thriving in private school. What I didn't know was that our 19-year-old babysitter wasn't just watching my children. She was studying my family like a research project, documenting our vulnerabilities, and systematically positioning herself to take everything I'd worked to build. Madison Chen had presented herself as the ideal caregiver. Columbia pre-law student from a respectable family, excellent references, and the kind of mature responsibility that made wealthy parents feel confident leaving their children in her care. What she'd actually brought into our home was a calculated intelligence that had been mapping our family's weaknesses, exploiting my husband's midlife insecurities, and building a case for why she deserved the life I was living. The diary pages scattered across my floor contained evidence of seduction, manipulation, financial planning, and identity theft that went far beyond a simple affair. Madison hadn't just been sleeping with my husband, she'd been systematically stealing my life while documenting every step of the process with the precision of someone who understood exactly how to dismantle a successful woman's existence and claim it as her own. But what Madison had failed to consider was that the woman whose life she'd been stealing wasn't just a wealthy housewife with more money than sense. I was someone who'd built $1 million business by understanding people's deepest desires and fears, and I'd learned long ago that the most dangerous enemies were the ones who smiled while they destroyed you. Picture this: our kitchen on a Tuesday evening in October 1995, where Madison was helping 8-year-old Sophie with homework, while 4-year-old James built elaborate block towers that would inevitably crash down with delighted squeals. The scene looked like something from a magazine spread about successful modern families. Beautiful home, well-behaved children, and the kind of reliable childcare that allowed professional parents to maintain demanding careers. Madison had been our babysitter for 8 months, recommended by the Weatherbys next door who'd raved about her maturity, academic excellence, and natural way with children. She arrived precisely on time, completed household tasks without being asked, and provided the kind of seamless support that made our complicated schedules function smoothly. Mrs. Blackwood, Sophie finished her math homework and James ate all his dinner. I've gotten them both ready for baths, and I thought I'd start the laundry if that's helpful. What I'd interpreted as exceptional work ethic and consideration had actually been Madison using household access to study our family's routines, financial documents, and personal relationships. Every helpful task had been reconnaissance disguised as responsibility. Our Westchester home represented everything Madison appeared to admire about successful adult life. Designer furnishings, expensive art, luxury cars in the circular driveway, and the kind of effortless elegance that money could buy when combined with professional taste. She'd often commented on our beautiful things with the kind of appreciation that seemed mature and appropriate. Madison, will you read us the story about the princess tonight? Madison, can you help me with my castle tomorrow? Music building with ominous undertones. Our children adored her with the kind of genuine affection that made Richard and me feel confident about our childcare choice. Madison had become part of our family routine in ways that felt natural and beneficial. Someone who genuinely cared about our children's well-being while supporting our professional obligations. Richard would arrive home from his law firm around 8, usually finding Madison completing homework supervision or organizing playroom activities with the kind of competence that impressed him. She'd provide detailed updates about the children's day, ask thoughtful questions about their developmental progress, and demonstrate exactly the kind of responsibility that successful parents valued. Madison, you're a godsend. Catherine and I don't know how we managed before you started helping us. What Richard had been expressing as gratitude for exceptional childcare had actually been the beginning of emotional manipulation, designed to make him feel special, understood, and appreciated in ways that would eventually contrast with his perception of his wife's demanding career and social obligations. Our household had achieved the kind of smooth functionality that allowed Richard and me to pursue demanding careers while maintaining family stability. Madison's presence had eliminated the stress and logistics challenges that plagued other dual-career families with young children. But the diary pages now scattered across our foyer revealed that Madison's integration into our family hadn't been about helping us achieve work-life balance. It had been about studying our vulnerabilities, mapping our financial assets, and positioning herself to systematically replace me in every aspect of the life I'd built. Madison's diary revealed a level of systematic observation and analysis that transformed my understanding of everything that had been happening in our home for the past 8 months. This wasn't casual teenage journaling. It was professional-level documentation of family analysis, relationship mapping, and strategic planning. Entry: March 15, 1995. Day 12 at the Blackwood House. Catherine works late every Tuesday and Thursday. Richard arrives home tired and stressed, clearly not getting emotional support from his career-obsessed wife. The children crave attention that Catherine is too busy to provide. Obvious vulnerabilities. Richard's need for appreciation. Catherine's guilt about work-family balance. Family financial complexity that she probably doesn't fully understand. Madison had been conducting psychological profiles of my family members with the precision of a trained behavioral analyst. Every conversation, every interaction, every family dynamic had been cataloged and evaluated for manipulation potential. Entry: April 22, 1995. Richard complained about Catherine missing another school event for a client meeting. He's clearly feeling neglected and unappreciated. Started asking about my college experience, my career goals, my thoughts about work-life balance. Opening established. Children mentioned that mommy is always on the phone with work. Positioning opportunity identified. The diary contained detailed financial analysis based on documents Madison had photographed while organizing our home office. She'd systematically documented our bank account information, investment portfolios, real estate holdings, and business assets with the thoroughness of someone conducting due diligence for a major acquisition. Entry: May 8, 1995. Blackwood family net worth approximately $3.2 million. Catherine's business generates $400,000 annually but requires constant client management. Richard's partnership track projected $800,000 by next year. Real estate assets include Westchester Home, $850,000, Hampton's House, $1.2 million, Manhattan Pied-à-Terre, $600,000. Life insurance policies total $2.5 million. Catherine's business depends entirely on her personal relationships. Eliminate her, acquire the lifestyle. But the most damaging documentation involved Madison's systematic seduction of Richard, carefully planned to exploit his emotional vulnerabilities while positioning herself as everything his wife apparently wasn't providing. Music building with strategic horror. Entry: June 14, 1995. Richard stayed late to help with children's bedtime routine. Conversation about Columbia Law School, career ambitions, life goals. He's clearly attracted, but fighting it due to marriage obligations and professional ethics. Need to increase emotional intimacy while maintaining plausible deniability. Catherine's business trip next week provides opportunity. Madison hadn't just been seducing my husband. She'd been studying him like a research subject, identifying his emotional needs, professional insecurities, and psychological triggers with the precision of someone who understood exactly how to manipulate successful men experiencing midlife vulnerability. The diary contained detailed plans for gradually replacing me in every aspect of family life. Taking over household management, becoming the children's primary emotional attachment, positioning herself as Richard's intellectual equal and emotional support, and systematically undermining my relationships with clients, friends, and extended family. Madison's documentation project revealed that our perfect babysitting arrangement had actually been an 8-month infiltration operation designed to study, manipulate, and eventually destroy everything I'd worked to build while positioning a 19-year-old college student to claim my life as her own. The deeper sections of Madison's diary revealed that her plan went far beyond seducing my husband and manipulating my family. She'd been systematically stealing my identity, replicating my business methods, and building a parallel life that would allow her to seamlessly transition into being Catherine Blackwood. Entry: July 3rd, 1995. Copied Catherine's client files, business contracts, vendor relationships. Her interior design success is built on personal connections and project management systems that can be replicated. Have been studying her design aesthetic, client communication style, project pricing structure. Could easily take over her business relationships once she's eliminated from the picture. Madison had been using her access to our home office to photograph confidential business documents, client information, and proprietary design processes that had taken me 12 years to develop. She wasn't just planning to replace me personally. She was preparing to steal my professional identity and career. Entry: July 20th, 1995. Attended Catherine's client presentation at the Morrison estate. Studied her interaction style, design presentation methods, project management approach. Could easily pose as her assistant or junior partner to existing clients. Have been building portfolio using variations of her design concepts. Several clients have mentioned being impressed by Catherine's new assistant during site visits. The diary revealed that Madison had been systematically accessing our personal computers, copying financial records, and building comprehensive files on our business operations, social connections, and family assets. She'd been creating parallel documentation that would support her transition into my life. But the most chilling discovery was Madison's psychological analysis of how to eliminate me from my own life without anyone questioning the transition. She'd been studying my behavior patterns, identifying potential character flaws, and planning ways to make my disappearance look like personal breakdown rather than external manipulation. Entry: August 10th, 1995. Catherine's perfectionist tendencies and work obsession create natural breaking points. Increased stress about missing family obligations, guilt about children's emotional needs, anxiety about business competition. Could easily trigger breakdown that would justify Richard seeking custody, me stepping in as children's caregiver, business clients transferring to more reliable provider. Madison hadn't just been planning to steal my husband, she'd been systematically preparing to take over my entire existence while making it appear that I'd abandoned my family through personal failure and professional obsession. Entry: September 15th, 1995. Richard increasingly dependent on emotional support I provide. Children prefer my attention to Catherine's distracted parenting. Business clients responding positively to my involvement in projects. Foundation established for transition. Catherine's elimination can appear natural result of work-life balance failure rather than external interference. The diary documented Madison's plan to systematically destroy my marriage, alienate my children, sabotage my business relationships, and eliminate me from my own life while positioning herself as the natural replacement who could provide everything I'd apparently failed to deliver. But what Madison had failed to consider was that the woman whose life she'd been systematically stealing wasn't just a successful interior designer. I was someone who'd built a business by understanding people's deepest desires and motivations, and I'd learned to identify manipulation before it could destroy me. Armed with complete documentation of Madison's 8-month infiltration operation, I began planning a confrontation that would expose her conspiracy while protecting my family from the psychological damage her manipulation had already caused. As someone who'd built a successful business by understanding client psychology and managing complex interpersonal dynamics, I recognized that simply exposing Madison's diary wouldn't be sufficient. Richard had been systematically manipulated for months, and direct confrontation would likely trigger defensive responses that could drive him further into Madison's influence. The first step was verifying Madison's claims and identifying additional evidence that would support the diary's revelations. Her references from previous families had been fabricated. When I contacted the numbers she'd provided, they led to disconnected phones or people who'd never heard of Madison Chen. Columbia University had no record of Madison Chen enrolled in their pre-law program. The address she'd provided was a mail forwarding service, and the respectable family she'd claimed was actually a carefully constructed identity designed to pass basic background verification without deeper investigation. More disturbing was the discovery that Madison had been operating similar infiltration schemes with at least 3 other wealthy families over the past 2 years. She'd systematically targeted successful women with demanding careers, young children, and husbands experiencing midlife vulnerability. Mrs. Blackwood, what you're describing meets the clinical definition of systematic psychological manipulation and identity theft, explained Dr. Patricia Winters, the forensic psychologist I'd consulted confidentially. This individual has been conducting organized psychological warfare against your family. The manipulation techniques described in this diary are sophisticated enough to suggest professional training or extensive experience. But the most valuable insight was understanding that Madison's operation depended on maintaining her position as trusted family insider. Exposing her gradually, while documenting her responses, would provide additional evidence while preventing her from disappearing before facing consequences. I began implementing subtle changes designed to test Madison's reactions and gather additional evidence, installing hidden cameras in our home office, monitoring computer access, and carefully tracking her interactions with Richard and the children while appearing to maintain normal family routines. October 12, 1995. Hidden camera evidence. Madison accessing our computer after children's bedtime, downloading client files and financial documents onto disk. Richard working late, unaware that our babysitter was stealing proprietary business information while he trusted her with our home security. October 18, 1995. Phone recording. Madison coordinating with unknown parties about timeline acceleration and target elimination. Discussion of backup identities and financial accounts that suggested this was part of larger criminal operation rather than isolated incident. The investigation revealed that Madison Chen was actually Michelle Carter, part of organized identity theft ring that specialized in infiltrating wealthy families, stealing business assets, and systematically destroying successful women's lives while appropriating their resources and relationships. But the final piece of evidence was the discovery that Madison/Michelle had been drugging my coffee during evening hours, causing the fatigue and cognitive fog that had been affecting my work performance and family relationships for the past 2 months. The 19-year-old college student who'd been systematically stealing my life was about to discover what happened when someone with 12 years of business experience and access to forensic psychology experts decided to fight back against organized criminal manipulation. The confrontation with Madison/Michelle was carefully orchestrated to occur when I had maximum evidence, legal support, and strategic advantage. Rather than emotional confrontation, I approached her elimination from our lives like the business operation it had always been. "Madison," I said as she arrived for her regular Tuesday evening shift, "we need to discuss some concerns about your employment with our family." The dining room table was arranged with printed copies of her diary entries, photographs of her accessing our computer systems, documentation of her false identity, and evidence of her connection to the organized identity theft operation that had been targeting wealthy families throughout Westchester County. "Mrs. Blackwood, I don't understand what this is about. Has something happened with the children?" Voice becoming coldly professional. Michelle Carter, age 24, currently wanted by authorities in Connecticut and New Jersey for identity theft, financial fraud, and organized conspiracy to defraud multiple families. The FBI has been tracking your operation for 18 months. The investigation had revealed that Madison Chen was part of a sophisticated criminal network that specialized in infiltrating wealthy households, studying family dynamics, and systematically stealing business assets while destroying the women who'd built them. My family had been targeted based on specific criteria that made us ideal marks for their operation. Your diary documented 8 months of systematic psychological manipulation, identity theft, financial fraud, and conspiracy to destroy my marriage and business, I continued, watching her realize that her perfect infiltration had been completely exposed. You've been drugging me, manipulating my husband, and stealing proprietary business information while posing as our children's caregiver. The evidence was overwhelming. Hidden camera footage of Madison accessing our computers, phone recordings of her coordinating with criminal associates, toxicology reports showing systematic poisoning, and financial documentation proving theft of business assets and client information. But the most satisfying element was Richard's response when presented with complete documentation of Madison's manipulation operation. The systematic seduction that had been making him question his marriage was revealed as calculated criminal manipulation designed to destroy our family for financial gain. Catherine, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I fell for this manipulation. She made me feel like you didn't appreciate me, like our marriage was failing, like she understood me better than my own wife. The FBI investigation that followed Madison's arrest revealed that our family had been just one target in a sophisticated operation that had successfully destroyed 12 other families over the past 3 years. The criminal network had stolen over $8 million in business assets while systematically destroying successful women's careers and family relationships. Madison Michelle received 15 years in federal prison for identity theft, financial fraud, conspiracy, and organized criminal enterprise. Her associates were arrested in coordinated raids that eliminated the entire operation and recovered stolen assets for multiple victim families. But the most perfect justice was the discovery that Madison's systematic documentation of our family had provided prosecutors with evidence that resulted in RICO charges and additional criminal penalties that would keep her incarcerated for decades. 2 years after exposing Madison's infiltration operation, I was sitting in my expanded Manhattan office, reviewing contracts for interior design projects that had grown my business to $1.2 million in annual revenue. The criminal case had generated significant media attention that positioned me as an expert in recognizing and preventing domestic infiltration schemes. My experience with Madison's manipulation had led to consulting opportunities with security firms, law enforcement agencies, and wealthy families seeking to protect themselves from similar infiltration operations. I'd become a recognized expert in identifying sophisticated criminal manipulation while maintaining family security. Richard and I had completed couples therapy that helped us understand how systematic psychological manipulation had affected our marriage while strengthening our relationship against future external threats. Our children had received counseling that helped them process the betrayal while maintaining their emotional security. Madison's diary, which had been intended to document my destruction and her appropriation of my life, had become evidence in a federal case that protected other families from similar criminal operations while establishing legal precedents for prosecuting domestic infiltration schemes. Mrs. Blackwood, your case has become required reading at the FBI Academy for agents specializing in white-collar domestic crimes, explained Agent Patricia Morrison during a recent consultation. Your systematic documentation of the infiltration process has revolutionized how we investigate and prosecute these types of organized criminal operations. Our home now included professional security systems, comprehensive background verification for all service providers, and the kind of protective measures that wealthy families should have implemented years earlier. We'd learned to verify rather than trust, while maintaining the family warmth that made our life worth protecting. I'd also begun offering pro bono consulting services to families who'd been targeted by similar infiltration schemes, helping them rebuild their lives while ensuring that the criminals who'd violated their homes faced appropriate consequences. The 19-year-old babysitter who'd systematically stolen my identity manipulated my family, and planned to eliminate me from my own life, had provided perfect documentation for a federal case that protected countless other families while establishing me as a national expert in domestic security. Madison had thought she'd found the perfect target. Successful woman with more money than sense, distracted by career obligations, vulnerable to systematic manipulation by someone young and clever enough to identify family weaknesses. Instead, she'd encountered someone who understood people well enough to build $1 million business, and who'd learned that the most dangerous enemies were the ones who documented their crimes while believing they were too smart to be caught. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just exposing criminal manipulation. It's using that exposure to build something bigger than what they tried to destroy, while ensuring that other families never have to experience the violation of discovering that their trusted caregiver was actually a professional criminal who'd been systematically stealing their lives. They'd called me distracted and work-obsessed. I'd used those accusations to build a business that protected families from exactly the kind of criminal manipulation they'd been conducting. Sound fades to secure silence. And sometimes the greatest gift a criminal can give you is complete documentation of their operation, delivered directly to someone with enough business intelligence and legal resources to ensure that their perfect crime becomes the evidence for their perfect imprisonment.
The funeral flowers were still fresh when my mother handed me the letter that would expose 23 years of lies and transform my understanding of everything I thought I knew about my family. "Rachel wanted you to have this after the service," she said, her voice carrying the kind of weight that comes with secrets finally demanding to be told. What I read in my sister's final letter wasn't just a confession. It was evidence that the perfect family tragedy we'd just mourned had been carefully orchestrated deception, and I was the only person left alive who knew the truth. My name is Jennifer Walsh, and for 31 years I'd been the middle daughter in what everyone considered a picture-perfect Catholic family: devoted parents, 3 successful daughters, and the kind of close relationships that made other families envious. What I discovered in Rachel's letter was that our eldest sister hadn't died in a tragic car accident as we'd believed for over 2 decades. She'd been murdered by our youngest sister, Emma, and my parents had spent 23 years building an elaborate cover-up to protect their remaining daughters from the truth. My family thought they'd created the perfect tragedy: a beloved daughter lost too young, a family pulling together through grief, and a legacy of love that would honor Rachel's memory forever. What they'd actually created was a foundation of lies that would crumble the moment someone with access to Rachel's real story decided that 23 years of deception was enough. The letter in my hands contained evidence that would destroy my parents' reputation, end Emma's marriage and career, and expose a conspiracy that involved not just my immediate family, but trusted family friends, local law enforcement, and community leaders who'd helped cover up a murder that everyone believed was an accident. But Rachel's final request wasn't about revenge or justice in the way most people would understand it. She wanted me to honor her memory by finally telling the truth, regardless of the consequences for the people who'd spent decades living comfortable lies built on her death. My perfect family was about to learn what happened when the person they'd trusted to keep their biggest secret decided that truth mattered more than their peace of mind. Picture this: the Walsh family home 3 days after burying Rachel's effects in a ceremony that marked the official end of our family's 23-year grief journey. My parents had finally decided to clean out Rachel's childhood bedroom, preserved exactly as she'd left it the night she died in what police had ruled a single-car accident on Highway 34. The decision to finally pack away Rachel's belongings had been presented as healthy closure, a family ready to honor her memory without being trapped by grief. What I didn't understand until reading her letter was that my parents weren't processing grief. They were eliminating evidence of the crime they'd helped cover up. "It's time, girls." Rachel would want us to remember her with joy, not sadness. We've held on to these things long enough. Emma had driven down from Portland with her husband and 2 children, presenting the perfect image of a successful marketing executive who'd built a beautiful life despite the tragedy of losing her older sister when she was just 15 years old. She'd spent the afternoon carefully sorting through Rachel's clothes and books, selecting memorial items with the kind of thoughtful reverence that had always made our parents proud. What I'd interpreted as Emma's mature approach to grief had actually been a systematic search for any evidence that might contradict the story our family had maintained for over 2 decades. She wasn't preserving memories, she was ensuring that her crime remained buried with our sister's reputation. The letter had been hidden inside Rachel's college literature textbook, a place Emma would never have thought to look because she'd never shared Rachel's love of reading. My mother had handed it to me with the casual instruction to decide what's worth keeping from Rachel's academic materials. Jennifer, the letter began in Rachel's familiar handwriting, if you're reading this, it means I'm dead, and our family is still living the lie that protected Emma. I'm sorry you have to be the one to know the truth. But you're the only person I trust to decide what happens next. What followed were 12 pages of detailed documentation about the night Emma had killed her, the cover-up that followed, and the 23 years of lies that had transformed a murder into a family tragedy that brought our community together in support and sympathy. While I sat in Rachel's childhood bedroom reading evidence of murder and conspiracy, my family continued their memorial activity downstairs, carefully preserving the mythology of tragic loss that had defined our identity for over 2 decades. But Rachel's letter wasn't just confession, it was instruction. She'd spent 6 months before her death documenting everything she remembered about that night, and the cover-up that followed. She wanted me to understand exactly what our family had done and why the truth needed to be told, regardless of the consequences for the people who'd built comfortable lives on her silence. Rachel's letter revealed that what everyone believed about her death was not just wrong, it was the opposite of what had actually happened. She hadn't died in a car accident while driving home from her college boyfriend's apartment. Emma had killed her during a confrontation about money Rachel had discovered missing from their shared college fund. Emma had been stealing from the college savings account Dad set up for all 3 of us, Rachel's letter explained. Not small amounts, over $40,000 across 2 years. I found the bank statements she'd been hiding and confronted her the night she killed me. The confrontation had happened in our parents' garage, where Emma had been loading her car for a weekend trip with friends. When Rachel presented evidence of the theft and threatened to tell our parents, Emma had grabbed a tire iron and struck her sister in a moment of panic that would define the next 23 years of our family's existence. But the cover-up hadn't been Emma's idea. She'd called our father in hysterics, and he'd made the decision to protect his youngest daughter by staging an accident that would explain Rachel's death while preserving Emma's future. The single-car crash on Highway 34 had been carefully orchestrated by our father, with help from his brother Michael, who worked for the county sheriff's department. Dad moved my body to the car and drove it to the curve on Highway 34, where there had been 3 previous accidents. Rachel's letter continued. Uncle Michael made sure he was the responding officer, and they staged everything to look like I'd fallen asleep at the wheel coming home from studying late. The cover-up had involved not just my immediate family, but trusted community members who'd helped create false evidence and eliminate anything that contradicted the accident narrative. Dr. Patterson, our family physician, had signed off on the autopsy findings without conducting a thorough examination. Father Murphy had provided spiritual counsel that focused on acceptance rather than questions about the circumstances. For 23 years, our entire extended family and community had mourned Rachel's tragic accident while supporting Emma through her grief and celebrating her eventual success as evidence that our family could overcome even devastating loss. Emma's achievements had been presented as honoring Rachel's memory and proving that tragedy could strengthen rather than destroy a loving family. But Rachel's documentation revealed that Emma hadn't just been living with guilt about the murder, she'd been systematically benefiting from it. The life insurance money that was supposed to support Rachel's education had funded Emma's college experience. The community scholarship established in Rachel's memory had been awarded to Emma, helping finance her graduate degree. The sympathy and support our family had received had directly contributed to Emma's opportunities and success. Rachel's letter included copies of bank statements, insurance documents, and correspondence that proved Emma had not only killed her sister, but had spent 2 decades building wealth and status on the foundation of that murder while maintaining the facade of being a grieving survivor. The perfect family tragedy that had defined our identity for over 2 decades was actually a carefully maintained lie that had allowed a murderer to build a successful life, while her victim remained silent in death. But Rachel's final instructions weren't about revenge. They were about justice. She wanted the truth told not to destroy Emma's life, but to honor the reality of what had happened and end the 23-year deception that had corrupted our family's foundation. Armed with Rachel's letter and supporting documentation, I began my own investigation to verify the evidence and understand the full scope of the conspiracy that had shaped our family's entire identity for over 2 decades. As a paralegal with 8 years of experience in criminal defense, I understood exactly how to analyze evidence without contaminating it or alerting the people I was investigating. Rachel's documentation was comprehensive, but I needed to verify her claims and identify additional evidence that would support her account. The first step was accessing public records about Rachel's death that I'd never had reason to examine. The police report filed by Uncle Michael contained inconsistencies that would have been obvious to anyone looking critically at the evidence, but the investigation had been conducted by someone with personal interest in reaching predetermined conclusions. The accident report described Rachel's car leaving the road at Highway 34's notorious curve, striking a tree and bursting into flames that had destroyed most physical evidence. But the fire damage patterns and impact analysis didn't match the physics of a single-car accident. They were consistent with post-impact staging designed to eliminate forensic evidence. More damning was the timeline analysis. Rachel's death had been reported at 11:47 p.m., but her college dormitory records showed her car leaving the parking lot at 6:23 p.m., over 5 hours earlier. The accident scene was only 45 minutes from campus, meaning there were 4 hours and 15 minutes unaccounted for in the official timeline. The autopsy report filed by Dr. Patterson contained medical findings that contradicted the accident narrative. Rachel's injuries included blunt force trauma to the head that occurred before the car impact, and evidence of defensive wounds on her hands that suggested she'd been fighting for her life before the accident. But the most compelling evidence was financial documentation that showed systematic benefit theft continuing for years after Rachel's death. The life insurance money, community donations, and scholarship funds that were supposed to honor Rachel's memory had been redirected to support Emma's education and early career in ways that violated the stated purpose of those contributions. Emma had not only stolen $40,000 from the original college fund, but had continued accessing money designated for Rachel's memorial scholarship, community donations intended for charitable giving in Rachel's name, and investment accounts that were supposed to remain untouched as family legacy funds. The investigation revealed that Emma's entire adult life had been funded by money stolen from her murdered sister, while our family maintained a public narrative about tragic loss and eventual healing that had earned them community respect and ongoing financial support. But the most shocking discovery was that I wasn't the first person to question the official story. Rachel's college boyfriend, Michael Torres, had contacted police 3 times over the years with concerns about the timeline and evidence, only to be dismissed by Uncle Michael as someone struggling to accept the loss of his girlfriend. Michael's documentation included photographs of Rachel's injuries from domestic violence incidents involving Emma that had been occurring for months before her death. Rachel had been systematically abused by her younger sister but had never reported it because she didn't want to damage Emma's college prospects or family reputation. The evidence was overwhelming. Emma had murdered Rachel during a confrontation about theft. Our parents had orchestrated an elaborate cover-up, and our entire extended family and community had unknowingly supported a 23-year conspiracy that had allowed a murderer to build wealth and status on her victim's memory. Rachel's letter had been exactly right. Our family needed to face the truth about what had happened, regardless of how it would destroy the comfortable lies that had defined our identity for over 2 decades. But as I prepared to confront my family with Rachel's evidence, I discovered one final piece of documentation that transformed my understanding of everything I thought I'd learned about my sister's murder and the 23-year cover-up that followed. Hidden in the final pages of Rachel's letter, written in different ink and clearly added months after the original documentation, was a confession that revealed the most devastating truth of all. Rachel wasn't dead. She had killed Emma that night in the garage, and our entire family had spent 23 years mourning the wrong sister. Jenny, the final section read, "I couldn't live with what I'd done, but I also couldn't face the consequences of telling the truth. Emma is buried in my grave, and I've been living as Emma for 23 years. If you're reading this, it means I'm finally dead. And you need to decide whether the truth matters more than the life I've built in our sister's name." The woman I'd grown up calling Emma, who'd built a successful career, married a loving husband, and raised 2 beautiful children, was actually Rachel, living Emma's life after killing her in self-defense during a confrontation about the abuse and theft that Emma had been inflicting for months. The entire narrative I'd believed was backwards. Rachel hadn't been the victim. She'd been the survivor who'd killed her abusive younger sister and then made the desperate decision to take Emma's identity rather than face murder charges for defending herself against someone who'd been systematically destroying her life. Emma had been abusing me for 2 years, Rachel's true confession explained. Physical violence, financial theft, psychological manipulation that made me question my own reality. The night I killed her, she'd come at me with the tire iron first. I defended myself. But when she died, I panicked and made a choice that would define the rest of my life. The cover-up hadn't been our parents protecting Emma from consequences. It had been Rachel protecting herself by becoming Emma. She'd convinced our parents that Emma had killed Rachel in self-defense, and they'd helped stage the accident to protect their surviving daughter from legal consequences, while never knowing they were actually helping Rachel escape justice for Emma's death. For 23 years, I'd been loving and supporting my sister Rachel while believing she was Emma, the successful marketing executive, devoted wife and mother and family member who'd seemed to heal so beautifully from her sister's tragic death, had actually been the person everyone thought was dead. Every family gathering, every holiday celebration, every moment of pride in Emma's achievements had been built on the foundation of identity theft and murder that our entire family had unknowingly supported while mourning someone who was sitting right at our dinner table. The perfect family tragedy wasn't about losing Rachel to an accident or even about Emma covering up murder. It was about Rachel successfully stealing her sister's entire life while convincing everyone, including our parents, that the victim was the survivor and the murderer was the one who died. But Rachel's final confession included one last revelation that would determine how I responded to 23 years of lies. Emma hadn't been the innocent victim I'd believed her to be. She'd been systematically abusing Rachel for years, and the night she died, she'd been planning to kill Rachel and make it look like suicide. Rachel's complete confession revealed that her decision to take Emma's identity hadn't been just about avoiding murder charges, it had been about survival. Emma's abuse had escalated to the point where Rachel believed she would be killed if she didn't defend herself that night in the garage. Emma had been planning my death for months, Rachel's letter explained. She'd been researching how to stage suicides, practicing different scenarios, and documenting evidence that would support a narrative about my depression and academic stress. The night I killed her, she'd come to the garage with zip ties and a suicide note she'd written in my handwriting. The evidence Rachel provided showed that Emma's theft from the college fund had been just the beginning of a systematic campaign to destroy Rachel's life and eventually eliminate her in a way that would look like an accident. Emma's abuse hadn't been random violence, it had been calculated preparation for murder. But 23 years later, the person who'd defended herself against a would-be murderer had built a beautiful life as the mother of 2 children who knew her as Emma Walsh Henderson. Exposing the truth would destroy not just Emma's life, but the lives of innocent children who would learn that their mother was actually their aunt and that their real mother had been planning to commit murder before being killed in self-defense. The choice Rachel had left me wasn't between justice and injustice. It was between different definitions of what justice meant when the victim had been planning to become a murderer and the survivor had been forced to choose between killing and being killed. As I sat in Rachel's childhood bedroom reading her confession, my family continued their memorial activity, completely unaware that the person they'd been mourning for 23 years was actually downstairs, helping sort through her own belongings while living as the sister she'd killed in self-defense. Rachel's final request wasn't about revenge or exposure. It was about choice. She wanted me to understand the complete truth and decide whether her children deserved to grow up with the stability she'd built for them, or whether justice required destroying the lives of innocent people to honor the memory of someone who'd been planning to commit murder. I've lived every day for 23 years knowing that I'm raising Emma's children as my own, while she's buried under my name. Rachel's letter concluded. I don't know if that makes me a murderer or a survivor, but I know that my children are innocent of everything that happened before they were born. The choice of what to do with this truth is yours. Jenny, are you okay up there? Emma found some of Rachel's college photos if you want to see them. I looked down at my sister, the woman I'd known as Emma but who was actually Rachel, calling up the stairs with genuine concern for my emotional well-being. She'd spent 2 decades being a loving sister, devoted daughter, and exceptional mother while carrying the weight of a secret that would destroy everything if revealed. Rachel's letter included one final piece of evidence, a sealed confession to be opened only if I decided that the truth needed to be told. But it also included legal documents that would transfer ownership of Emma's grave to me, allowing Rachel to finally be buried under her own name if I chose to honor her memory by protecting the life she'd built. 1 year after discovering Rachel's confession, I was sitting in my apartment, reviewing the legal documents that had transferred ownership of what everyone believed was Rachel's grave to my name. The woman buried there was actually Emma, and the woman everyone thought was Emma was living as a successful marketing executive and devoted mother in Portland. I'd made the choice that Rachel had trusted me to make. Her children deserved to grow up with the stability and love she'd provided them, regardless of the circumstances that had brought them into her life. Emma's plan to murder Rachel had died with her, and the justice that mattered most was protecting innocent children from consequences they'd never deserved. The grave that bore Rachel's name would continue to honor her memory, but I was the only person who knew that the woman who tended it every year on the anniversary was actually Rachel herself, mourning the sister she'd killed in self-defense while protecting the life she'd built from the ashes of that terrible night. My parents continued to believe they'd helped cover up Emma's crime to protect their surviving daughter. Emma continued to live as a loving mother and successful professional while carrying the weight of 23 years of necessary deception. And I became the keeper of a truth that was too complex for simple categories of right and wrong. My experience analyzing Rachel's evidence had led to a promotion at the law firm where I worked, specializing in cases involving family trauma and identity issues. I'd become an expert in helping people navigate the complex legal and emotional challenges of situations where traditional justice didn't account for the full reality of human experience. I'd also begun a relationship with Michael Torres, Rachel's former boyfriend, who'd spent 23 years trying to get someone to investigate the inconsistencies in her death. We'd found healing together in understanding that sometimes protecting the innocent matters more than exposing the truth about the past. The family that had spent 23 years mourning a tragic accident had actually been healing from a trauma that was far more complex than simple categories of victim and perpetrator could address. Rachel had chosen survival over justice, and I'd chosen to honor that choice by protecting the life she'd built. Emma had planned to murder her sister and make it look like suicide. Rachel had defended herself and made the desperate choice to steal her attacker's identity. Our parents had unknowingly helped Rachel escape consequences they thought belonged to Emma. And I'd decided that sometimes the greatest justice is protecting innocent children from the sins of adults who died before they were born. Sometimes the best revenge isn't exposing family secrets. It's understanding that truth can be too complex for simple justice, and that protecting the innocent matters more than honoring the memory of someone who'd been planning to commit murder. Rachel had called it betrayal when I chose to keep her secret. I'd called it love when I decided that her children's future mattered more than Emma's memory. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone who's spent 23 years living a lie is the promise that their truth is safe with someone who understands that justice isn't always about exposure, but sometimes about protection, healing, and the choice to let love triumph over the need to be right about the past.
The group chat had over 3,000 messages, 3 years of coordination, 12 people working together to gaslight Dr. Catherine Reed into believing she was losing her mind. But Catherine wasn't their first victim, and she wouldn't be their last. My name is Dr. Morgan Hayes, and I'm a federal prosecutor who specializes in conspiracy cases. What I discovered this week will change everything you think you know about betrayal, because these women weren't facing individual deception. They were targets of coordinated psychological warfare. The case file arrived with a priority flag from the Department of Justice. 6 separate incidents across 4 states: identity theft, conspiracy, financial fraud, coordinated harassment. But when I reviewed the evidence, I realized we weren't looking at random crimes. We were looking at systematic psychological warfare campaigns. Dr. Catherine Reed, forensic psychologist in Chicago. For 3 years, her husband David led a group called Weekend Warriors. 12 people, including her best friend Sarah, documenting her every move, gaslighting her into believing she was unstable, preparing to destroy her in divorce court. But Catherine turned their own documentation against them. 3,000 messages became evidence in federal conspiracy charges. David got 15 years. Sarah lost her career. The entire group faced financial ruin. The precision was terrifying. This wasn't emotional revenge. This was systematic psychological operations that required coordination, planning, and sophisticated understanding of legal vulnerabilities. Catherine's case led me to 5 others with identical patterns. Not individual betrayal. Coordinated campaigns involving multiple conspirators working together to destroy successful women. Emily Saunders, corporate attorney in Boston. Her entire family conspired to give her brother Brian $100,000 while telling her she was too ambitious for help. But Emily discovered Brian's mismanagement was intentional, part of a coordinated plan to drain family resources while positioning Emily as the selfish daughter. Catherine Blackwood, interior designer and mother. Her babysitter Madison wasn't just infiltrating her family. She was part of a criminal ring that targeted wealthy families. Multiple conspirators worked together to replace successful wives and mothers, stealing their identities, their children, their entire lives. Denise Washington discovered her husband Marcus wasn't just cheating with his assistant, He was part of a workplace conspiracy that included his supervisor and HR department, systematically undermining women in their industry while protecting each other's misconduct. Each case showed the same terrifying pattern: multiple people working together with systematic precision to destroy women who posed threats to their network's power structure. But the most disturbing case was Jennifer Walsh, who discovered her family had been living a lie for 23 years. Her sister's car accident was actually murder, covered up by a family conspiracy that included their father and uncle. The truth was buried to protect the real killer. Jennifer chose silence, becoming the keeper of a secret that could destroy innocent children. But her case revealed something that chilled me to the bone. These conspiracies weren't just targeting individual women. They were multi-generational, systematic campaigns that involved entire families, communities, and professional networks. Sophia Lancaster's case showed workplace and family conspiracy. Her cousin Emma's manipulation wasn't individual entitlement. It was part of a systematic family pattern where multiple relatives conspired to exploit Sophia's success while undermining her professional reputation. The evidence was overwhelming. We weren't looking at 6 separate cases of individual betrayal. We were looking at coordinated psychological warfare campaigns that involved dozens of conspirators working together to systematically destroy successful women. My secure phone buzzed. Unknown number. Dr. Hayes, your investigation has revealed something significant. We should discuss what you've discovered before it's too late. Director Walsh. I stared at the message, realizing that whoever was behind these conspiracy networks was now targeting me. The meeting was in a federal building in Washington. Official, secure, the kind of place where classified briefings happened. Director Walsh looked like what she was: someone who understood how conspiracies worked and how they could be countered. Dr. Hayes, she began, your investigation has uncovered something the Justice Department has been tracking for years. These conspiracy networks aren't random criminal activity. They're systematic campaigns coordinated by professional networks that specialize in destroying successful women. She placed files on the table that made my blood run cold. Evidence of coordinated conspiracy networks operating across multiple states, involving hundreds of participants, targeting thousands of women over decades. The cases you've investigated represent different types of systematic conspiracy campaigns. Family conspiracies that drain resources while gaslighting successful daughters. Workplace conspiracies that systematically undermine women in leadership positions. Criminal conspiracies that target wealthy families for identity theft and replacement. But Dr. Hayes, what you haven't realized yet is that these conspiracy networks are coordinated. They share methodologies, resources, and strategic guidance. What you're looking at isn't random criminal activity. It's systematic psychological warfare. Director Walsh's briefing revealed the horrifying scope of what we were facing. The conspiracy networks operated like professional organizations with specialized departments, training programs, and systematic approaches to destroying successful women. Dr. Catherine Reed's Weekend Warriors group wasn't unique. Director Walsh explained. We've identified over 200 similar conspiracy groups operating across the country. Each one targets successful women using coordinated psychological warfare techniques. The evidence was overwhelming. Family conspiracy networks that systematically drained successful daughters' resources. Workplace conspiracy networks that coordinated to undermine women in leadership positions. Criminal conspiracy networks that targeted wealthy families for systematic replacement operations. Emily Saunders's Family Conspiracy shows how these networks operate across generations. Multiple family members coordinate to exploit successful women while maintaining plausible deniability through emotional manipulation. Catherine Blackwood's Criminal Conspiracy reveals how these networks recruit and train infiltrators. Madison was part of a systematic operation that targets dozens of families simultaneously. Denise Washington's workplace conspiracy demonstrates how these networks coordinate across professional domains to systematically exclude women from positions of power. But Director Walsh's most shocking revelation was that the Justice Department had been systematically documenting these conspiracy networks and developing coordinated responses that could dismantle them. Dr. Hayes, the women you've been investigating didn't just achieve individual justice. They used systematic approaches that could serve as templates for countering coordinated conspiracy campaigns. She showed me evidence that made me question everything I thought I understood about federal law enforcement. The Justice Department had been secretly supporting counter-conspiracy operations that provided targeted women with resources and strategic guidance to dismantle the networks targeting them. Dr. Catherine Reed's systematic documentation of her conspiracy network became a template for federal counter-conspiracy operations. Her techniques for turning conspirators' communications against them are now taught to other targets. Emily Saunders's legal strategies for protecting family resources from conspiracy networks are being adapted for different family conspiracy scenarios. Catherine Blackwood's security methodologies are being used to identify and counter criminal conspiracy infiltration. The scope was staggering. The federal government had been secretly coordinating counter-conspiracy operations that provided systematic responses to systematic conspiracy campaigns. Dr. Hayes, these conspiracy networks represent a national security threat that requires systematic federal response. Individual prosecutions aren't sufficient when the problem involves coordinated networks operating across multiple states and professional domains. Director Walsh's final revelation changed everything I thought I understood about federal law enforcement. The Justice Department had been secretly developing counter-conspiracy operations that could systematically dismantle the networks targeting successful women. Dr. Hayes, your prosecution expertise is exactly what we need to scale federal counter-conspiracy operations. These networks operate like organized crime. They require systematic federal response that can address their coordinated nature. The operation was unprecedented. Federal task forces coordinating with targeted women to systematically document and dismantle conspiracy networks. Resources that provided superior strategic guidance and legal protection for women facing coordinated campaigns. Jennifer Walsh's case demonstrates how these conspiracy networks operate across generations. Her family's cover-up of murder shows how systematic these campaigns can become. Federal intervention could have prevented decades of systematic deception. Sophia Lancaster's case reveals how these networks exploit professional success while systematically undermining victims' reputations. Federal counter-conspiracy operations can provide resources that match the sophistication of the networks targeting them. The choice was unprecedented. Join federal counter-conspiracy operations that provided systematic responses to systematic conspiracy campaigns, or continue prosecuting individual cases while the networks continued operating with coordinated impunity. 6 months into my role as lead prosecutor for federal counter-conspiracy operations, I understood the true scope of what we were building. Not just individual case prosecution, but systematic dismantling of coordinated networks that targeted successful women. The 6 women whose cases had brought me into this world had become more than individual success stories. They were founding case studies for federal methodologies that could systematically counter coordinated conspiracy campaigns. Dr. Catherine Reed's documentation techniques were being taught to women facing similar group gaslighting campaigns. Emily Saunders's legal strategies were being adapted for different family conspiracy scenarios. Catherine Blackwood's security methodologies were being scaled for systematic criminal conspiracy counter-operations. Each successful counter-conspiracy operation became a template that could be adapted for different conspiracy network types. Federal resources that provided superior strategic guidance and legal protection for women facing coordinated campaigns that individual prosecution couldn't address. But the operation's true innovation was systematic coordination. When conspiracy networks operated across multiple states and professional domains, federal counter-conspiracy operations could provide coordinated responses that matched their systematic nature. The cultural impact was measurable across multiple domains. Professional networks that had protected coordinated campaigns targeting successful women were being systematically dismantled through federal intervention. Family networks that had operated multigenerational conspiracy campaigns were being exposed and prosecuted. Criminal networks that had targeted wealthy families for systematic replacement operations were being systematically identified and destroyed through coordinated federal response. We'd achieved something unprecedented: systematic federal response to systematic conspiracy campaigns that provided both individual justice and broader network dismantling that served national security interests. The conspiracy networks that had operated with coordinated impunity were discovering that their targets now had access to federal resources and strategic guidance that could systematically dismantle their operations while providing legal protection for their victims. 2 years into federal counter-conspiracy operations, the transformation was complete. We'd systematically dismantled over 50 conspiracy networks, prosecuted hundreds of conspirators, and provided federal protection for thousands of women who had been targets of coordinated campaigns. The 6 cases that had revealed this systematic conspiracy threat had become federal training materials for counter-conspiracy operations. Each woman's successful counter-campaign had been adapted into systematic methodologies that could be scaled across different conspiracy network types. But the operation's greatest achievement was preventing systematic conspiracy formation. Professional networks that had once coordinated campaigns targeting successful women were now being monitored through federal surveillance that identified conspiracy formation before it could achieve systematic coordination. Family networks that had operated multi-generational campaigns were being systematically identified and dismantled through federal intervention that protected both current and future generations from systematic psychological warfare. Criminal networks that had targeted wealthy families were being systematically prevented through coordinated federal response that identified and countered infiltration attempts before they could achieve systematic replacement operations. The federal landscape had fundamentally shifted towards systematic conspiracy prevention and counter-operations. Conspiracy networks that had once operated with coordinated impunity were discovering that federal law enforcement had developed superior counter-conspiracy capabilities that could systematically dismantle their operations. The Justice Department had proven that systematic conspiracy campaigns required systematic federal response that could address their coordinated nature while providing comprehensive protection for their targets. Federal counter-conspiracy operations had achieved something unprecedented: systematic prevention of coordinated psychological warfare campaigns that protected successful women while dismantling the networks that had targeted them for systematic destruction. We'd created a new paradigm where conspiracy networks faced systematic federal response that matched their coordination while providing superior resources and strategic guidance for their targets. The federal counter-conspiracy program had fundamentally altered the landscape of systematic psychological warfare. Conspiracy networks that had operated for decades with coordinated impunity were being systematically dismantled through federal operations that provided both individual justice and broader network destruction. The 6 women whose cases had revealed this systematic conspiracy threat were now federal training specialists, teaching other women how to systematically counter coordinated campaigns while working with federal resources to dismantle the networks targeting them. Dr. Catherine Reed's counter-conspiracy techniques had become federal standard methodology for dismantling coordinated gaslighting campaigns. Emily Saunders' legal strategies were being used to counter family conspiracy networks across multiple states. Catherine Blackwood's security operations had become templates for systematic criminal conspiracy prevention. In the federal age, Systematic conspiracy required systematic counter-conspiracy, and federal law enforcement had proven that when conspiracy networks coordinated campaigns targeting successful women, federal counter-operations could provide superior coordination, resources, and strategic guidance that systematically dismantled their networks while protecting their targets. The war between systematic conspiracy and systematic counter-conspiracy had fundamentally shifted toward justice through superior federal coordination and systematic network dismantling that ensured conspiracy campaigns faced coordinated federal response that exceeded their capability to maintain systematic operations against successful women. Federal counter-conspiracy operations had achieved the ultimate victory: systematic prevention of coordinated psychological warfare through superior federal resources and strategic dismantling of conspiracy networks that had once operated with systematic impunity.